Welcome back to Pixel Project Radio, the finale of our Final Fantasy IX mini-series. And what a series it has been. We're finally ready to bring it home. Once again, I am joined by Eric from the Unlockables podcast. Eric, thanks for joining me, as always.
No problem, Rick. As I told you before, I've named my audio file Final, so this has to be the last part.
Final, use this one really, for real, actual final version.
Version 3.
So, as we said at the start, we were saving the community forum for this episode, and it has finally arrived. The dawn is here, and the community forum rises, as always. And we got some really good results, so I'm going to read through some of these. First bit of correspondence we got was from Dave Jackson from Tales from the Backlog. Here's what he has to say. I first played Final Fantasy IX in 2019 or so and only made it about 2/3 of the way through it as I was bored by the gameplay and didn't connect with any of the characters outside of Vivi. Fast forward to 2022, after meeting Rick and Eric and hearing their praise for Final Fantasy IX, and I started to get that nagging feeling of, what are they seeing that I didn't see, that I often get, so I tried again. Perhaps my mindset was different the second time, or perhaps knowing the broad story beats allowed me to focus on the smaller moments. It's funny how that works sometimes. But anyway, the second time around, the character development shone through and allowed me to see why so many people hold this game near and dear. I still have some issues with the pacing of the end of the story, the final villains, and the gameplay overall, but I'm happy that I can now count myself as somebody who can connect with the heart of Final Fantasy IX. I think a lot of people feel that way, but I will agree. I think this is at least up to 9, the best character development the series has seen, for sure.
I think some of the best overall, but that would require a very in-depth series of analysis of all Final Fantasy games, right? So if whenever you're ready to do that, we can dive right into that as well.
Shout out to the channel Never Knows Best, one of my favorites, did a entire history review of Final Fantasy where he went through every mainline game. It's really good.
Such great work.
Yeah, seriously. Thank you, Dave. Next, we've got, I'm going to read him by his new name, Ray Ray the Dork Lord, previously known as Ray Ray the Quiet Man and Ray Ray the Bad Game Guy. Here's what he has to say. Having gone through Final Fantasy 7 and 8, at least at the time most of it, I welcomed the series' return to its medieval environment. I also liked that they increased back to a 4-person party, which makes battles that much more fun to me. Just looking at all the different characters, mainline and NPCs, showed me how much fun and love was put into this game, and Vivi is possibly my favorite character in all of the Final Fantasy series. It felt like a return to form for the series, although it turned out to be short-lived. Still, one of my favorite Final Fantasy games. Maybe I'll relive it again someday. Well, until you do, I hope you're enjoying reliving it vicariously through us. And I agree wholeheartedly on all of those points. And we have one more, we have 2 more, but I'm saving one for a little bit later because it has spoilers. This last one is from John Haig. I can't remember if this is John's first time writing in or not. You all may see John in a future episode, a very future episode. I cannot bear to think of anything else being on my plate at this time. But here's what John has to say. Final Fantasy IX will forever hold a special place in my heart. It was the first game in the Final Fantasy series I ever played, and it got me hooked on the series. I immediately fell in love with the setting, characters, and story, and yes, Vivi is my favorite. The battle system was fun, minus random trances, and the soundtrack draws you into each scene and story beat. We'll always look back fondly on this game and my time with it. And for what it's worth, Rick and Derek have made me want to go back and play through the game one more time and enjoy it as an adult. That's the name of the game. That's the goal here. I'm glad to hear that we're accomplishing it.
I don't think you can ask for any higher praise than that. And it's been really cool to kind of see the long tail of 9 over the years and see people, maybe who weren't as first, think very much of it, kind of warm up to it and understand what it was trying to do. So I know we've talked to a couple people in the community that have just kind of been like, hey, I heard you guys talking about it. We went back and played it, and, we see why it's so special. So I think you can't ask for anything more than that.
Here. I agree. It's been great, and it is cool to see over the years how the reputation of this game has kind of done a 180, because when it was released, it was not really looked upon too fondly, largely because of the graphics and presentation, which I I don't agree with personally, but that's just me.
And we had the specter of 10 kind of hanging over everything as well. So
Yeah, that's true. And 7 before this, too.
true.
If you are listening and you want some more challenging opinions in your community forum, just wait. There is one that was submitted that has some spoiler element to it, so I'm going to read it in a bit. But for now, Eric, let's talk some side quests.
Side quests. Yeah, we've been saving these towards the end for the last episode. So I know you were doing a large majority of them. I didn't really bother with them with my very, very rapid recent playthroughs. So I'll let you take the helm on this, and I'll jump in when I think it's necessary.
Sure. Well, let's talk about the one that I bet most people have done. Well, the two that I bet most people have done. We'll start with chocographs.
Yeah.
Eric, did you do the chocographs?
I have before. I did not in this playthrough, but I have done the whole, discovered all the treasures, played Chocobo hot and cold for hours and hours to level up my beak to the highest level, achieved Chocobo Nirvana, all that good stuff. So yeah, I have done it before. I'm familiar. I believe it's necessary to get at least Zidane's ultimate. Is it Zidane's ultimate weapon? Or somebody's ultimate weapon, I believe.
I think you get Zidane's and Garnet's from this quest. I'm not 100% sure. You can get a couple but you need the flying Chocobo. So what this side quest entails is, first, you're going to enter one of the Chocobo spots. First, it's Chocobo Forest, then Chocobo Lagoon, and finally Chocobo Air Garden. And you're going to be playing this game called Hot and Cold, where you dig in the ground. And I think, did we go over this already?
I think we touched briefly in part, whichever the first part I was in when we got there. I think we talked about it a little bit. Because I remember you making the very emphatic queh sounds. So.
Oh, yes. How could I forget? But yes, you're going to be digging up the chocographs. And what those are basically little treasure hunts. I cannot imagine anybody doing all of these on a PS1 without a guide. That sounds insurmountable to me, but we all had more time back then, so who knows. And as Eric, as you alluded to, once you find all of them, you eventually reach Chocobo Nirvana, which is Chocobo Air Garden, your Choco home, and you get into the good graces of the Big Pooba Fat Chocobo.
All hail our real Lord and Savior, Fat Chocobo.
How could you do Bobby Corwin like that?
Oh, you're right. That's his son. It's canon.
That's about all for that. You get a lot of goodies from it. You also get to fight this super boss, the hardest boss in the game, and probably the hardest Final Fantasy villain up until this point, I think, maybe. But we will talk about that in a minute. Next, we're going to talk about Mognet.
It's been a long time since I did the Mognet quest, so you finished that off for this playthrough, correct?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I did. I finish it in every playthrough because I just think it's so funny. And it's the only time in the game you get to hear the Moogle theme.
Right.
So the way this works, we've touched on this in the past few episodes, but whenever you're talking to a save Moogle, you have the Mognet option. For some reason, Artemisian, the purple male Moogle, that's male M-A-I-L, but I think he's also M-A-L-E. Doesn't matter. I'm not too worried about the genders of the Moogles. But he's not delivering the mail for some reason, so you are delivering the mail. And towards the end, you start on this side quest where people will be delivering a series of letters from Alexandria, from the first Moogles that you ever found, all the way to the end of the game. And they're all about Mognet, which is it's essentially the USPS of the Moogle world.
Although probably, honestly, when it is working, probably better run than the actual post office.
Yeah, as we've come to find out, I'm still in a beef with that one in Indiana.
Yeah, that's a side note for the listeners. Yeah, when you were sending me the little thing you were sending me, it got stuck in literally what is considered the worst mail sorting facility in the country. I can say the name because I'm not too relatively close to it. It's in Bedford Park. I believe that's kind of like around the Chicagoland area. And it just kind of disappears for several days into the maw of this sorting facility. It was gone for so long that Rick's tracking on the package was just like, hey man, we have no idea where this package is now. Like it's just we're just kind of left up to the mail gods if it shows up or not. So yeah.
Oh, it was so annoying.
Funny.
I'm coming for you, Bedford. But But eventually you start delivering these mails directly related to Mognet across all the land, all the Moogles that you've met previously.
How many letters do you think it would be if you had to count them all? It's a decent number. It's not just a few. It's a lot.
Oh, they tell you at the very end. They say thank you for delivering X number of letters. I want to say it's 27. I could be wrong. I didn't write it down. But eventually you learn that Artemision was using a product called Super Slick to make his fur coat shiny. He liked to look pretty. But that Super Slick was necessary to keep the Mognet Central running. So that's why it's not working anymore, and that's why we have to be delivering the letters. Eventually we come to find that Ruby back in Alexandria has Super Slick, and she uses it in her hair. And it's implied that she can just get more, so like, I don't know why the Moogles can't just get more. And maybe they need to invade the human infrastructure and economy. I don't know. But
that's a Final Fantasy game I would play.
Yeah, Final Fantasy Gaiden. She gives it to us, and the way you find Mognet is it is in one of the northern islands. There is a crack in the mountain, and on all of these cracks, you can find several. If you use a dead pepper while you're riding your chocobo will kind of go insane for a second and just tunnel into the mountain. And usually it's just treasure, but here we find Mognet. And once we give them the Super Slick, everything works out and everything's okay again. And Artemision is not punished at all. Everybody just, but it's pretty cute because you get to see them like working a little assembly line of letters and such. It's very nice. And like I said, you get to hear this wonderful Moogle music for the first time in the game.
Artemision just wanted to look pretty. You can't blame him.
That's true. Related to the chocographs is the Friendly Monsters quest, and there's a reason it is related. We've talked about this in the past episodes, where you find the fairy battle, you give the friendly monsters the item that they're looking for, usually ore, sometimes lapis lazuli, stuff like that, and then they'll tell you, who to look out for next. Once you finish all of this, the final one is Friendly Yan, who is, interestingly, the hardest random encounter in the game if you choose to fight him. Once you're done with all of that, they say, now you can fight the round guy. And who they're alluding to is this game's super boss, Ozma.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Ozma is interesting. You can find him in Chocobo's Air Garden. And Ozma is a really weird... There's not a lot of information about him in the Ultimania either. Ozma kind of looks like a planet, but it is just streaked with hues of red and orange and green and yellow. And it is far and away the hardest boss in the game. It's level 99, 55,500 HP. And there's a trick to fighting it. Well, actually, there's several tricks to fighting it. It will use several different attacks on you depending on what's going on in your party. It's got level 5 Death. It's got Doom. Several of the most powerful spells in the game, such as Curaga, Meteor, Holy, and Flare. And it'll also absorb your MP. If you by doing the Friendly Monsters quest, you also sort of give a debuff to Ozma, so it can now be hit with both physical attacks and shadow-based magic attacks, which is key because otherwise you're not going to beat this thing.
Mm-hmm.
Straight up. It's also pertinent to know you kind of don't want to make your party immune to everything that Ozma can throw at you. So, for example, if all of your party members are not multiples of level 5 or level 4, then it's not going to be able to cast Death or Holy, which means it will default to more powerful spells like Meteor, which does 999 damage, or Flare, things of that nature. So you kind of actually don't want to have your party immune to everything. Otherwise, you're going to have a bad time. I'm not going to go through the whole strategy. I suggest you look it up if you're interested. I have beat Ozma before. I have the achievement to prove it from 2020, but I did not fight him this time, unfortunately. Have you ever fought him?
Yeah, I did. Again, long time ago, because it is just such a pain in the ass to deal with all that kind of stuff. Yeah, he's super challenging, and I'll have to take your word for it that he's the most challenging up to this point, because I know the reputation of other super bosses. You always hear about like Ruby and Emerald Weapon from Final Fantasy VII and how much of a challenge those fights are. But I always found Ozma particularly challenging, not kind of knowing some of the strategies, just because not only will he cast all of those things and throw all of that at you, but he will also take like several turns in a row. Like he'll do more than one thing before you get to attack. And it's, if you're not properly prepared for this fight, I know there's a strategy that I utilized when I beat him that involved having both Aiko and Garnet in the party, probably just for the extra like kind of white magic and just some of the utilization of the summons that Aiko can do. But he's not fun. He's not easy. The only information, because I was reading up on him today, because I knew we were going to talk about him a little bit. The only information I could find on Ozma was that the area you find him in is called, like, it's referenced as like an Eidolon cave. So a lot of the people that discuss the lore think that maybe Ozma was like a failed summon or something like that, and his upper and lower halves are kind of like, his upper half is lighter and his bottom half is darker, kind of like a being of like shadow and light and stuff. So definitely very mysterious. He shows up a couple other times in various other, like, I think he shows up in like Final Fantasy Record Keeper, a couple of those gacha games. So it's definitely probably the peak physical challenge in this game for sure.
Yeah, it's not for the faint of heart for sure, but you also don't have to fight him.
No, you don't miss out on anything. I mean, he just gives you the Pumice, right, which is important for later.
Pumice piece, yeah.
Yes, the Pumice piece, yeah. The PP.
There is also the frogs, catching frogs. Eric, have you done the frog quest to completion?
I have done the frog quest to completion because I believe it's the way you get Quina's ultimate weapon, and it's how you level up his or her. Apologies, the most powerful spell, like the frog drop spell or whatever it's called. So yeah, it's a little bit grindy and requires you to visit several Q's marshes, but definitely worth it if you're looking to get probably the most powerful version of Quina in your party that you can. And
Quina is easily one of the best characters that you can have. I mean, they just have an insane amount of magical capability. Yes, the Gastro Fork is Quina's best weapon. You have to fight Quail to get it.
Yep.
It's not an overly difficult fight, but then again, I didn't do it until like the very end, so I may have just been highly leveled. And as you said, Quina's frog drop magic spell, the damage it deals is based on how many frogs you've caught. So once you get to 99 or 100, it's going to be really, really powerful. I completed it for the first time for this playthrough, actually. I've never gotten it all the way to the very end before because the frogs take so long to populate. The trick is you want to leave one male frog and one female frog, and if possible, also a golden frog, which will speed up the rate at which they reproduce. They're just going to be reproducing as you are out in the world. So, and if you're using fast forward to get through stuff like grinding, like I did, it goes off of the in-game clock. So fast forwarding is going to not affect it. So in a way that makes it kind of slower.
Yeah, the first time I did it, I didn't know about the golden frog, so I would leave the male and female frog there, but I didn't know that the golden frog helped, because you always want to catch the golden frog. You're like, oh, I have to catch it, but yeah, it's better in the long run to just leave the golden frogs alone.
And finally, there is Excalibur 2, a side quest I have literally never done. And honestly, I probably never will. Have you?
No, I have not, and I don't know why. I mean, it's doable. I've watched a stream, I've watched a speed run of somebody do it without like using the speed up or anything. So it is possible to do, but the gimmick here is Excalibur 2 is technically Steiner's like ultimate weapon, although it's more of like a trophy weapon, and it's linked to an achievement. I believe it's like the ultimate sword or something like that. It's like proof you got it, and you have to get to pretty much the end dungeon of the game within 12 hours, and that is pretty challenging to do because you're basically like skipping all encounters to try and get through the game as fast as possible. I was just looking it up while you were gone because I knew we were going to talk about it, and a couple interesting tidbits on it. If you're playing on original hardware, there's a trick you can do that they said if you like time opening the lid of your PS1 during certain cutscenes, it'll skip them and save you like 35 to 40 seconds, won't come off the in-game timer. And interestingly enough, too, this is harder to do on the PAL version of the game because of like the difference in like the hertz of, it's like a 50, 60 hertz like difference there. So the in-game clock still runs at the same speed, but the game is technically slower. So you're at like a disadvantage. So yeah, it's not for the faint of heart. I think it's easier to do now because you can if you buy like a more modern version or remastered version of the game, you can turn on the fast forward, you can turn on like the infinite damage and basically like breeze through the game really fast and get it. But yeah, doing it without that stuff is pretty tricky and requires like a mastery and understanding of the game that I just don't know if I have the patience to go through that.
Well, you had said it's doable. I want to push back on that and say that it's, you really do have to kind of cheat the system to do this.
Right.
And I don't think it has anything to do with skill, to be honest. I mean, you have to follow a guide. Nobody's going to get this without a guide.
Right.
And even I was going through using the speed up feature and the 999 damage for all grinding and random encounters because, again, I've played this game so many times. I turned it off for bosses. But even still, my play clock was close to 30 hours, a little over 30 hours at the end. So you have got to jump through so many hoops and do so many weird shortcuts, not talk to anybody that is extra. It doesn't sound like an enjoyable playthrough for me just to get an achievement,
You're also kind of like experiencing again like a bare bones version of the game because you don't want to like watch any extra cutscenes, any of the ATE stuff. You're right. You don't want to interact or engage with anything that is not literally doing like the premium path to get to the end of the game as fast as possible. So, I mean, yeah, again, I've seen it done. I don't really have a desire to do it myself. It's not really worth it. I did have it because when I was younger, I had a Game Shark, and one of my save files on Final Fantasy IX just had everything like cheated in, so I had like the best equipment. But yeah, I've never done it legitimately, and I don't ever think I want to. I'll leave that to the speedrunners.
Yeah, no interest here. No interest from me.
The sword looks cool, though. I mean, it's a neat sword.
Yeah, 100%. Well, there are a couple of more side quests we might reference as we go through, but those are the main ones I wanted to talk about. Eric, you ready to bring this thing home?
Let's bring it home, man. It's been a long journey, but we're finishing it today.
All right, let's jump back in to where we left off. So at the end of last time, our party is about to go to Kuja's hidden base. This base can be found, it's over on the eastern side of this continent. Remember, we were made privy of this information from the Black Mages, specifically Mr. 288, after Kuja took all of them with him. So he tells us where to find them. He asks us to please save them. It's over on the eastern side of this continent, and you will find 4 pools of quicksand there. The trick here is this. 3 of them are going to be emitting puffs of sand. Those are going to take you into fights against the antlion, which you don't want to do that right now. The one that's not puffing out, that's the one you want to go to. And when the party jumps in, they black out immediately. And when you come to, it's just Zidane and Frog Sid in a circular metal kind of room. And it turns out Kuja has been planning this. We walked right into his trap, super villain style, and he has all of us, he's got all of us in these metal sort of prisons. Kuja is able to speak to Zidane here. I'm not quite sure how, but he tells him, I've got you where I want you, so you need to do a favor for me. And if you don't, you're going to be dropped into lava. And the floor at that point, opens up a little bit. He reveals that there's lava underneath. Basically, everybody's dead if Zidane doesn't do this favor. So we have no choice. So we exit the cell, and 2 black mages teleport us to Kuja's chamber. Zidane is extremely pissed here, but he doesn't really have a lot of leverage, so Kuja explains what he wants. He wants us to go to this place called Oilvert on the Forgotten Continent to retrieve something called the Gulag Stone. The reason he's sending us is because Oilvert is surrounded by an anti-magic barrier, and Zidane is, quote, too stupid to use magic himself. It's pretty good. He is even being such a good host that he's offering to let us bring 3 people along with us, and he'll take us there in his special airship. He uses this really nice line in retrospect. He says, I'll let you bring 3 of your party members along because nobody likes fighting against themselves. We don't know what that means yet, but that's going to be important.
Yes.
So Zidane has to go. Right? Garnet is going to be a liability no matter where she is, because 1, she's a magic user, and you can't use magic here, and 2, she still can't concentrate. She's still experiencing that trauma. Her commands often fail, so no matter where she goes, she is going to be a bit of dead weight. You want to take Freya because she can get her best weapon in the game here. And then the rest is kind of up to you. I took Zidane, Freya, Garnet, and Amarant. Steiner is a total beast, and he can help the magic users in their party. Because, get ready, everybody. This is a classic Final Fantasy move of splitting up all of your team into 2 different parties where you have to use everybody.
Classic D&D rule. You never want to split the party, but you're forced to here. I did the same party composition as you. I opted to leave Steiner behind just because he is very useful and very strong. I took Quina instead and left Garnet behind just because I was like, my Quina at this point didn't have very much. I hadn't been feeding them or getting any of the kind of blue magic or anything like that. So I was just like, Quina can just be another body, another damage dealer. So yeah, Freya, Amarant, and Quina were my party.
It's a good choice. Steiner was far and away my strongest character here. At this point, I had MP attack for Steiner, and he's just cleaning house. Like, I wasn't even close to the end of the game, and he was doing 9999 occasionally. It was so good.
Yeah, and pairing him with Vivi is a no-brainer because he has his magic sword command too. So
once we choose our party, he summons them into the chamber and teleports us to the hangar. We see that gigantic airship, the Hildegard, and we get on. It automatically flies us to the Forgotten Continent. We have previously not been able to access this yet, so this is our first time here. I didn't bring Quina, so I couldn't do the frog catching in Q's Marsh here, but there are some chocographs here as well that you can dig up. It took me a minute to find the friendly monster here because I just kept running into the ragtime mouse, and he kept quizzing me about the in-game information.
Yeah, he tends to show up a lot when you're looking for other stuff.
That's another side quest. I technically didn't finish it this time,
right.
But I've gone through it before. You just get a ton of AP and gil basically by doing all of this, and I think a special item, but it's eluding me right now what that is.
Right. I'm also glad, too, I have to say that I'm glad you had the pronunciation of it because I didn't want to try to pronounce it because I never knew if I was saying it right.
Well, I don't know if that's how you pronounce it.
Listen, we'll take it as gospel. It's all good.
Hey, sure.
Eventually, you're going to go through, like, it's the Forgotten Continent. Eventually, you're going to cut through a bunch of, like, canyons that kind of are kind of like a maze thing. There's some decently difficult random encounters here. I think, like as on the previous continent, you can run into the cactars here who can kind of F you up if they do their 1,000 needle attack. And you come across this structure that is just so alien looking that it's very obvious that it wasn't built by any of the civilizations that currently exist on this planet.
Yes, and this is supported by a few things. When we get into Oilvert, the music, first of all, is an arrangement of the place I call home, or the place I'll return to someday. Remember, that is the opening theme. This is actually important. Another thing is that all of the treasure chests are blue, just like we saw in the Aoife tree, and Zidane's touch seems to trigger lifts and such here as well.
Also similar to the Aoife tree, because nobody else could activate the lifts.
Exactly. We also start to see holograms here, and we see this alien language that somehow Zidane is able to read. He says he can't read it, but it's more like it's speaking to him. And it essentially teaches us in these really small segments. We can't piece it together, but we learn about this planet called Terra. We learn about there was a planet called Terra. Something happened that was not good for the people on Terra. The Invincible was involved somehow. That's all we know at first, until we come across this giant room, and this is like this part freaked me out as a kid so much. We come across this giant room that is filled with these faces on the wall, and these faces will kind of pop out and change color so that it looks like they're highlighted into the foreground, and they speak about Terra's history. It is so freaky. I definitely recommend looking this up if you've never seen it.
It's so unlike any other place or structure we've been before, especially that part. Yeah, that part too as a kid freaked me out. I was just like, whoa, this is... And it's finally here we're starting to get what I like to call the Final Fantasy-ness aspect of the story, where things are starting to take a little bit of a weird turn, right? Things are not what they seem. And we kind of get this impression that, oh, the Invincible, this ship that we've seen before, but it's attributed to this other planet. So what is going on here? The threads kind of start to reveal themselves.
Exactly so. When we get to this room and the faces begin speaking, this is what they say. The seed's decline was not our fault. All vegetation and vessels died out. The decay of our Terra triggered it all. In order to stop the decay, many methods were considered. Ultimately, the best minds of Terra's civilization gathered. Then, a final resuscitation was attempted on the mother continent. Unfortunately, it ended in failure. It was later discovered to have been the catalyst. Subjects were selected. After 4 tremendous sacrifices, eternal prosperity seemed within reach. Flora and fauna were revived, but ... is still in stasis. Final results are still pending. In order that our glorious history not die with us, we were constructed, and then it trails off. So we're given all this information, but we don't quite know what to deal with it yet, how to deal with it yet, or how to put it together, but it will become clear in time. There's just so much going on at this point. Zidane can somehow read this alien language. Things are only responding to his touch. Nobody is sure what's going on, but Zidane doesn't want to stop and think about it because everybody's in danger, right? As much as we don't want to help Kuja, we have to get this Gulag stone and take it back to give to him.
Also, shout out to the Gulag stone. I just like that's what it's named.
Yeah, that's a kind of a silly name. After we take it, we get into a fight with Ark, who is actually a summon that you can get in this game. It's the most powerful summon. And it's actually, fun fact, Ark is sort of this like giant battleship that can transform into like a humanoid battleship. That is so a cool. direct reference to one of the first Square games and Uematsu's first official credit, I believe, Cruise Chaser Blasty. Pretty cool.
What a throwback. And it's such a cool summon too when you summon it. It's very in the vein of like Knights of the Round of how long it takes for that summon sequence to play out.
Oh my god, yeah.
But it's so cool. But seeing it once is enough. And yeah, it's a throwback to literally one of like the first things he ever did, which is really awesome.
So once we get the stone, we cut back to our our party that's back held captive with Kuja. Kuja's decided that he doesn't want to play fair. And he says, if Zidane can't get back in 10 minutes and reset my hourglass, I'm just going to dunk you all into lava because I'm a super villain. And here comes Frog Sid. It's Sid's time to shine.
Let's go.
This is a section that I think a lot of people dislike. We're going to be doing a couple mini games as Frog Sid to help our party escape. Do you like these mini games?
I mean, I honestly don't have a problem with it. I really like this part. I think just because of the combination of, I just have a special place in my heart for Frog Sid, and the track that plays while you're playing these games is like so catchy, and I love it so much. It's great. But yeah, the premise is that the hourglass is being guarded by like I believe it's like called like a hedgehog pie or something like that is the name of the monster. Oh, it's right in there. Man, if only I could read. It's basically a game of red light, green light. You have to mash your button on the controller to advance Frog Sid forward because the key is like attached to the hedgehog pie's cage. And if the hedgehog pie turns around and sees you, it'll scare Frog Sid off and you have to start all over. So it's very much you want to advance, like mash the button to advance him when the pie is not looking, and then stop when he turns around, and then until you get the key, which is the first part of the game.
Yeah, that's the first minigame. We need that key to reset the hourglass, but the hourglass is way up on top of a shelf, and we are just a baby frog.
You're just a little guy.
So we have to use these scales to balance them so we can jump up onto the scales and walk up to the top of the shelf.
Conveniently placed.
Yes. This basically just involves looking at each... you see 4 weights made out of clay, iron... I didn't write clay, iron, metal, and something else. I don't quite remember.
It's like stone?
Maybe stone.
Yeah.
But you have to place them in a certain order so that when you get on top of it, they will hold you up and you can get to the hourglass. This is hilarious because you come back into this room right after we let everybody out, and the room is so small And as Sid, everything looks enormous.
Right.
Whereas if we were Ico, we could have just walked in and grabbed it.
Right. Yeah, no, I don't mind this part too much. It's a nice little departure. The mini game's not hard. It's just pretty much, if you have a brain, you're just like, oh, I need to put the 3 heaviest things on the scale to weigh one side down so I can jump up inside it. I don't know. I like it. I like the song. I'm a big proponent of Frog Sid, so it worked for me.
Yeah, it's not so bad. It was tough whenever I played this once on Switch docked, because there was like a noticeable input delay, and I kept fucking this up.
Yes.
Yeah. Now that Sid has reset the hourglass, though, he saves the rest of your gang, whoever you happen to choose to leave behind, and we're going off into this dungeon of Desert Palace. There is a trick throughout this dungeon. We hear some black mages kind of talking about this in vague terms. You're going to find a bunch of bloodstones throughout here. You light a candle, and the bloodstone will shine, and then you interact with the bloodstone, you get a nice little item, and unbeknownst to you at the moment, you were debuffing an upcoming boss. I just went through and did all of these because I didn't want to struggle with this boss.
Same. I always go through and do all of them because I guess I just never realized it was possible to reach the boss without doing it. So I always just did it, and the bloodstones turn out to be items that are pretty strong and pretty useful. You can equip right away, but yeah, it's highly recommended to do these, especially if you tend to struggle with bosses. Even if I don't think the boss is necessarily that hard, if you skip one of them, because you can set up some things to do that pretty much trivialize the boss.
And these aren't too difficult to find. You have to go through and light a series of candles that'll open up pathways to different areas, and that's where you find these various bloodstones. But you can just speed run through if you don't want to be bothered. But what these will do is there's an upcoming defense mechanism that will trigger called Valia Pira, and it kind of looks like a giant stained glass window, sort of. It's very clearly not like a I don't think it's an animal or something like that, a living creature. But whenever you disable all the bloodstones, it takes away all of its buffs. It'll take away its attack buffs, its speed buffs. It'll weaken all of its magic. It's all stuff that works in your favor. You can choose to ignore those and make the battle harder, but why would you do that? You know what I mean?
Yeah, who would willingly make things harder on themselves? And if you have at this point gotten a piece of gear that gives the auto reflectability, I believe it's impossible to lose this fight. I'm pretty sure, because I think it mostly uses just magic based attacks, I believe.
That sounds about right to me, I think.
Yeah, because reflect obviously reflects magic back at your opponent. So if he can do nothing but magic, you're pretty much safe. You'll be fine, even if everyone else is dead.
So after this battle is over, a newly illuminated platform comes up, and we stand on it. But we are teleported then back to Zidane's group. When we get off of the Hildegard, we expect to be teleported into Kuja's room, but we're not. We're teleported into this new area. And Kuja calls out to Zidane to come through the doors alone. And, we're still not in a position to bargain. So reluctantly, he goes inside by himself. Inside, Kuja shows him that your Desert Palace party is below, unconscious. And he said, I'll let them go if you give me this stone. But outside, the real Desert Palace party teleports in. They run up and they're like, hey, there's no time to explain. We got to stop Kuja. And they dart in. Everybody rushes in to help Zidane, but Aiko gets shut out. The doors close right as she's running up. And as her back is turned, Zorn and Thorn come and kidnap her.
No bueno.
Yeah, those devils. Inside, the jig is up. Kuja says, oh, okay, you figured out my little trick. Okay. He was like, I wanted to take the stone and then finish you all off, but instead I'll take the little girl. So he uses telekinesis, because I guess he can do that.
Yeah.
And takes the stone, and then he teleports away. By the time we reach outside to chase after him, the airship is gone. So he has left.
So we're off to our boat to catch our ride, and we basically give chase. There's a nice little, I guess it's not really a cutscene. It happens in the game on the overworld map that shows your boat giving chase to the airship, and it takes us to another continent, which is one of the forgotten, lost. I get all the names mixed up, but it's
Lost
basically the fourth
Continent.
one that we haven't been to yet. It's kind of covered in snow, and we pass a weird looking structure that ultimately leads us to Esogaza, which is where we kind of see Kuja's ship land.
Yeah, that is the weird looking structure. And it's also the one area in the game that like ultimately matters the least because it's sort of just a middle point.
Right.
It's basically just like a small church where many religious pilgrims and such travel to, since you can see the shimmering aisles from here. When we get inside, this very pompous and grumpy priest is agitated that we're being loud and barging in and stuff like that. And he's not happy to see Vivi because Kuja, along with all of the Black Mage army and Zorn and Thorn, they all passed here on their way to Mount Gulag. So that's where we're going. we're not spending a lot of time here.
And if you've been following along, you'll know that Kuja has the Gulag stone. So what a coincidence that we're at Mount Gulag.
Exactly. Presumably, everybody figures that he's trying to extract her Eidolons.
Right.
Which makes sense. That's exactly what they did with Garnet. Mount Gulag is a former mining settlement that was set up by a race of mole people. So we're going to be going through... It feels very Final Fantasy VII to me for some reason. We're going to be going through... We're going to be going through all of these different like abandoned shacks and houses. There's a well. Lots of goodies in here. If Quina's with you, you can get a really good blue magic spell called Twister, but that comes from the Red Dragon enemy. You're going to be ambushed by a couple of them. They're pretty tough, in all honesty, at this point in the game.
Yeah, I'd say they're probably a step above the usual random, almost like kind of mini bosses. Not quite to that level, but yeah, they're definitely harder encounters. And shout out, I wish they had the mole people in the game that we can meet, because shout out to the mole people. You know, they run society here. They're in Final Fantasy IX. Gotta love it.
They run society here.
I guess is that the mole people or the lizard people? I don't know. Either.
Oh
either
yeah, you're
one.
thinking of the lizard people.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. The real elites.
Right.
Yeah, you got to listen to more Alex Jones, man.
Yeah, I've trailed off lately. I got to catch up on his latest season.
You're slacking. They're making the frogs gay.
I know, right? Or in this case,
Sid.
maybe the moles. I don't know.
So it turns out our hunch was correct. Kuja is here, and Zorn and Thorn are trying to extract the Eidolons from Aiko. It's not working, though, because she's not 16. She hasn't come of age yet, and for some reason, that's just, a prerequisite for this procedure. Kuja says, I don't care. I don't care if she dies. You just need to do this. So they're like, oh, okay. He needs an Eidolon more powerful than Alexander to take down Garland. He says, I must destroy him before Terra's plan is activated, or my soul will no longer be my own. So we're hearing more about this planet Terra. We heard about this recently. Not sure what this means just yet, but the pieces will come together soon.
Right. It's the second time, too, we hear, I think, Garland's name mentioned, because I think we hear it mentioned once before during Alexandria's destruction.
Yes, and he is named whenever we see that, because Kuja immediately says, oh, that's Garland.
Yes.
So we know who he is. Our party doesn't. That's a type of literary irony, everybody. Who says you don't learn things around here?
Right. It's your one thing you learned today.
Yeah, only one. As the Jesters attempt this process again, Mog comes out to defend Aiko. It turns out Mog is actually an Eidolon named Medine, who took the form of a Moogle to stick near Aiko to look after and protect her. But now that Mog has reverted to an Eidolon, she's no longer a part of the physical realm, so she's gone, and she says, I'll always be here to look after you. I'm still with you. And she leaves her ribbon behind, which will let us learn this summon. This also takes down Zorn and Thorn, at least for the time being.
I really kind of like this scene, too, because it's, I just think of it in terms of Aiko's story, right? Mog is the one that's constantly with her, and her arc has a lot to do with, like, overcoming, being alone, and, stepping out of her town when she promised her grandfather he would stay, and this kind of stuff. And Mog has always kind of been with her, and now Mog is gone now that she's found these new friends and this new kind of found family. So it fits very well with the theme of, finding that home and found family and that sort of thing. I like this part a lot.
Absolutely. And it makes sense too. I mean, if you accept the fact that she was in the village of summoners and is now the sole survivor, it makes sense that one of the Eidolons would look after her, I think.
Yeah,
Especially since she seems to keep up with her praying every day based on some of the conversations we have with her.
right.
Kuja is incensed by this, though. He goes into an aside with himself about how he needs a soul to harness the power of trance because he just saw what Mog could do, and he seems to know exactly where he can get one. So he walks out of here. He's got bigger plans. And this is where Zorn and Thorn kind of transform into their true form, the Melty Gemini, which is a hilarious name. It kind of looks like a Resident Evil Parasite Eve monster.
It does.
With like two deformed jester heads on top.
Definitely one of the grossest things in this game for sure.
I like the design a lot.
I do too, yeah.
It's honestly, this is a pretty easy battle.
Yeah.
The annoying thing, though, is they cast zombie on everybody immediately at the start of the battle, which prevents you from gaining any EXP or AP. You don't gain EXP from boss fights usually, just AP, but it's a pain in the ass because remedies and Asuna will not cure it. Only vaccines can cure it. And at this point in the game, I had one. So
yeah, I was going to say same thing. I don't think I had enough for everybody at this point in the game at all.
You can buy them in Esto Gaza. I just, I completely missed it. Yeah, I missed it completely.
So I wanted to ask you about this because this was a part that isn't always very clear to me, and maybe this is just me being stupid, I don't know, but it's kind of weird how when Mog does the whole summon Medine thing that Kuja identifies this as trance, because it doesn't feel the same way that trance has been presented to us in the game so far. And this is what causes him to kind of like change his plan and be like, oh, if I acquire this power, you know, or whatever he's trying to do, he's like, I need this power. It just doesn't feel very communicated very well at this point. I don't know. Maybe that's just me because I didn't understand that until later.
Yeah, you know, it could just be he's misunderstanding what Eidolons are. And maybe he didn't know that Eidolons could take the form of earthly creatures.
Okay.
And he's just misinterpreting this as trance. He clearly knows about trance and he knows how powerful it can be. So, because I think he brings it up before. So this is on his mind. So he might just be misattributing this, I would think, maybe.
Okay.
I don't know. I think that's the case.
Yeah, no, because it's just in game, it's just not it. In game, it felt to me like Mog just transformed into their Eidolon form that they'd like disguised themselves as to like take care of Aiko, and it wasn't necessarily attributed to trance. So I don't know if I was just misreading it or I just misunderstood the scene or not. That was just one of the scenes that kind of always stuck in my head.
I don't think you're misinterpreting it. I don't think it's explained explicitly. In all honesty, man, you know what? I bet the writers probably just thought that nobody would get hung up on this.
It's possible, yeah. And I'm just the one that they're like, oh, some redheaded kid in the Midwest will not understand this.
Yeah, they're like, well, you know, if at this point they can accept magical jesters being turned into horrible demons, they'll probably just skip right past this.
Yeah,
you know?
You're right. It's not the Resident Evil Joker monster I have a problem with. It's the fact that this one line in this scene didn't land the way it should for me. That's the whole problem I have. And drop it to a 7 out of 10.
Now, afterwards, Vivi tells us that the mages, we meet up with Vivi, and he says, you know, the mages all learned that Kuja was lying. And all of the mages that were here reluctantly helping Kuja they're just in complete and total shock. They, you know, and Vivi is also extremely angry because, you know, they went against their beliefs. And you even see some of them, they're like, oh my God, like, what have I done? I've done such horrible things to my own people. And you know, they don't know what to do. And Vivi is also incredibly angry, but he tells Zidane, like, look, all I can do right now is just sit with them. I just have to be with them. Because again, I mean, they're his people. He's found his people. And we're gonna maybe talk about that more when we get to the end and we're kind of wrapping up the themes of the game. We leave Vivi to it. And in an incredibly bizarre twist, super convenient Deus Machina kind of thing, we hear a woman behind the door, and turns out it's Hilda, Sid's wife.
You mean Hilda Ex Machina?
Yeah, Hey,
Hey.
we take her, we return to Lindblom. She basically forgives Sid on the spot. She like makes one or two jabs about him cheating, but otherwise, boom, she's forgiven him. She turns him back into a man again. And wouldn't you know it, how convenient, Kuja just happened to tell her all about his master plan.
Of course.
Without her even asking.
Villain's got a monologue.
It kind of fits. Yeah, it kind of fits because, yeah, he's the supervillain archetype, but he's also like, he's painted as a pretty big narcissist.
Yes.
So I can kind of believe it. It's not enough to make me criticize the whole flow of the game, I think, but it is a little too convenient. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I think it fits with his character because he's, up until now, we've seen him, he's very dramatic and grandiose and very much relies on a lot of theater. So of course he would want somebody to divulge his master plan to and talk in very grandiose terms about.
So here is the gist of it, of what he told Hilda. Kuja is not from Gaia. He is from the planet Terra that we heard about in Oilvert. He has plans to use Gaia for some greater power. Terra is connected to some place called the Shimmering Island, and in order to get to Terra to find Kuja, we have to find the seal into that world. And the key to that seal is in an old castle in the northern area of the Forgotten Continent. It doesn't have a name, so Hilda decides to call it Ibsen's Castle, after the adventurer Ibsen who found it. That's just like little lore tidbit.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to be going there pretty soon. While this is all going on, we see some ATEs of Tantalus and Steiner looking all over Lindblom for Garnet, who is nowhere to be found. And, you know, we're going to look for her too. And Zidane has a hunch that he knows where she might be. And that is back in Alexandria. So that's where we're going. Tantalus is already there. We can't find her, but we do find Beatrix. She gives us a garnet, like an actual gem, a garnet, to give to Garnet, and advice. She says, you know, pass on the advice, tell her to look after herself first, not the kingdom, but herself. And she says, you know, I bet she is at the queen's grave. And sure enough, when we get there, that's where she's at. We find her there.
It's funny to me that no one would think to check there. First of all,
it seems like the most obvious place. Yeah.
And second of all, it's also very impressive that, you know, we spent the first couple of days like traversing across the land, and it's relatively dangerous. Although I guess since we got rid of the mist, it's not so dangerous anymore. The fact that she just like left and got from Lindblom to Alexandria by herself is pretty impressive.
Hey, she's handy. She's been traveling with Zidane. She knows how things work.
Yes, but I mean, she up until this point, we don't know that she can talk or do anything. So
yeah, that's true.
But sure enough, she is there, and she reveals to us, she says Zidane's name, that her voice has returned. And she seems to be in relatively better spirits, although I don't think she's completely 100% yet. And Zidane and her have like a nice little moment here, and he takes out the garnet that Beatrix gave to give to her, and just kind of just throws it really high in the air so that she can catch it. Like, he just wrote, you know, he whips it. Like, he just fucking chucks it into the air.
He really does. Like, no care at all. This precious gem that could shatter. He just he hurls it. I would push back. I don't know that I would say she's in better spirits. She seems pretty beaten down. Like, like it almost seems like she's tired to the point where she just can't fight anymore, and she's just accepting that her situation is bad.
Right. I think it's an improvement, though, that she can speak again, though.
Oh, for sure.
Definitely better than before she got here. But yeah, she's still got a lot to process.
The reason that I bring that up, though, is because of the coming scene. Zidane passes on Beatrix's advice. Zidane gives her some advice himself, and you know, all of this is really moving Garnet, and it's causing her to sort of have an internal epiphany that, you know, she can move on from this trauma. Again, the game's theme is to live, right? Finding the meaning in life. Life itself, and we're going to talk about this a lot towards the end. Life itself inherently doesn't have meaning, and there are two branches that you can go through that. One of the branches is finding your own meaning in it, and Garnet is going through this right now, though this is not articulated. So she says, she says, "Can I borrow that dagger again?" And she just takes it from him, and she walks away and she says, "Remember me how I was." And as a kid, I just didn't think anything of this, but as an adult, if I were playing this from the first time, I would be like, "Is she about to take her own life?"
Right. Exactly.
Like she does not seem better. She's talking, but she does not seem better. Is she about to end it?
Right. Because she just goes running off with it. And even Zidane's kind of like,
Yeah, and he runs after her, but she doesn't. She takes the dagger and she cuts off her ponytail into an impossibly perfect bob, I might add.
Yes.
It's a little bit on the nose, but it's a really touching scene. This is her being reborn again. Her character is transformed. This is also the developers and several people on the scenery team, event designers. They all list this as one of their favorite scenes. She's been through so much, and she's coming into her own as a person now. She no longer has to rely on a kingdom or on Zidane or on her mother. She's gone through all of this and has processed it and is now becoming her own person. And she cuts off the hair. The strands of her hair scatter across the landscape of Alexandria as a sort of memorial to the young, naive girl that we once knew. They're flying away like ashes. I mean, she is literally being reborn here. And in this same cutscene, we see that Cid, now with the mind of a man, has finished the Hildegard 3. So we get a new airship.
Excellent. Yeah, one thing about the previous scene is, I think too, as we kind of see those hairs scatter to the wind as well. Again, it's very on the nose. We also kind of see the citizens of Alexandria starting to rebuild the town. It's in a state of beginning to be rebuild, the scaffolding going up and construction happening. So not only are the people of Alexandria rebuilding, but Garnet is, rebuilding as well into the person that she's now going to be. And I think earlier too, we get an ATE with human Cid and all his mustachio glory kind of going to his engineers and working with them. And we get the music's really awesome. We get cool kind of Hildegard 3 shipbuilding montage type of thing going on where he's directing people and they take the previous boat and combine it with the airship. And I like that part a lot.
I would have preferred an 80s montage,
exactly.
Workout style myself. But
yeah, exactly. Again, Cid got the best mustache in the game for sure.
Yeah, one of the major themes in this game is the cycle of life too. It's not one, well, maybe I misspoke. It is a theme in this game, the cycle of life. And as we see here, despite all of this tragedy, Alexandria will continue to rebuild.
Right.
What dies goes into the earth and is reborn again. That is quite literally what happens here, which we'll get to in about an hour or so. But
right.
We're seeing it here, and we see it with Garnet too, and we see it with Lindblom. It's part of the human condition as far as this game is concerned. Everybody is really shocked at Garnet's hair, which I think is really funny. But it is now time to go to Ibsen's castle, or if you're like me, and probably you, Eric, I would assume, this is a JRPG and we just got our first airship. It is side questing time.
The game's been opening up little by little, and now it's finally, you're supposed to go to Ibsen's castle, but you can literally go pretty much wherever you want now. It's great. It's freedom.
Yeah, all of the side quests we talked about in the beginning, you can do that all here. You can also go back to Quan's dwelling. I think I wrote this in the notes later, so I might just save it. But there is an entirely optional city that you can now access called Daguerrero. Have you gone here?
Yes, I have. I like this place a lot. It's very cool.
It is really cool. Do you want to talk about what it looks like and what you can do here?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say, you say, it's a completely optional town, and it's not 100% of town. You enter a cave, and there's a room that's like a central foyer, and it's kind of like a circular, almost like a. I would say it has a very library-ish type of feeling to it, because there are people there that are here to study the history of the world and some kind of collective knowledge that that is here. So
It feels like an academic building.
Yes.
Right? You walk in and there is like a grand waterfall. Well, not really a grand waterfall, but there's like this grand center area with a library up top, and there's a bookshop over on the other side. People are building in the back. It's like it feels like an academic institution.
Yeah, it's kind of like removed from the world too. So it's just kind of it's on one of the islands of the continent that you wouldn't. It's just like removed from civilization. But apparently people come here from all over. So yeah, I like the vibes here a lot, and you can do a lot of things related to side quests here, which I'll let you take that on and I'll comment on as we go through them.
Oh sure. So Stellatio side quest, returning those to the duck lady. You can find one of those here. The Mognet quest will take you here. You find Alleyway Jack here from the very beginning of the game, and also when he tried to rob Garnet and Ico. Turns out he is actually an international treasure hunter, and he will assess your treasure hunter rank, which is determined by how much treasure you find in the world, how many chocographs you find, things like that. And if your rank is S, he will tell you his real name, a Final Fantasy throwback, Gilgamesh. The joke character from so many earlier games.
Right. Who has pretty much shown up in most games from the point he was introduced onwards. So yeah, this was a really kind of cool. I mean, if you're going to make a Final Fantasy 9 that's a throwback to all the other games, I mean, you have to have Gilgamesh.
And he shows up in a timeless meme from when we were kids.
Which one was that?
Garugamesh?
Oh, Garugamesh.
With the goth kid.
Yep.
I'm going to find it and post it in the server.
Absolutely.
What's really interesting here, you can get some rare cards here as well. If you found the Naming Way card earlier in the game, I don't remember where you find this.
Right.
But there's a scholar here who is fascinated by Naming Way, like the character. And if you give him the card, he offers to rename one of your characters. You can pick anybody and rename them. And I did something I've never done before.
Oh.
I renamed Garnet to her real name. It kind of made the game weird. Yes. I'm actually gonna just talk on that now briefly. This is totally, I mean, I don't think you're ever directed on how to do this.
No, it's very obscure.
You, at any time, I think in disc 4, you can go back to Madain Sari and Lonnie will be there. You can talk to her for a little bit and she tells you to go to the Eidolon Wall. And I'm doing this completely off the dome. I forgot to write it down, but I think the way it works is you run around counterclockwise a certain number of times, and after you hear a sound effect, you reverse the direction, run around a certain number of times, and then you will be able to look at this inscription from Garnet's father, where you learn that her real name was Sarah.
Mm-hmm.
Sarah, she became Garnet whenever she was adopted after the real Garnet died. But I renamed her to Sarah, and it made it a little weird the rest of the game. Yeah,
it's very obtuse. It's not very well. It's something that you wouldn't really like think to do, I guess, unless you're paying very, very specific attention. And I don't think it's something that if you miss playing through the game is like critical to understanding of her character or anything. It's just a nice little additional thing that you can learn about her character to connect her a little more to what her actual home is.
Yeah, I don't know how anybody would have found this before the age of the internet. I really don't.
No, you'd have to be doing some weird stuff. Be like, who would just run in circles at the Eidolon Wall?
Maybe the largest side quest you can do here involves getting the Excalibur sword for Steiner. Mm-hmm. The way you do this is you have to purchase 4 items from the Trano auction house. That is the Doga's artifact, Unsmere, Rat Tail, and Griffin's Heart. You then have to sell them to various nobles around town. You have to just talk to them and they'll offer to buy them. And you can make a profit on this, by the way. Mm-hmm. Then you can buy in the auction house the magical fingertip, which is really expensive, but you buy it, you take it to this scholar in Daguerrero, and he'll tell you this story about how he misses his wife who has passed on, and he thought having the fingertip of like an esteemed artist he'd be able to create a doll that looked like her, but he realizes that that's meaningless. And again, going back to one of the main themes of the game, the cycle of life, he's like, I have to find meaning in my current life and not dwell on my past. So it's actually really touching. But in return for helping him break out of his existential depression, he gives you the Excalibur sword, which is an extremely good sword for Steiner. I think that's what I used for the rest of the game, to be honest.
Yeah, I think one sword he gets a little bit later. I think it's the Ragnarok sword is technically better, but I mean it's the Excalibur. So I mean it's technically supposed to be his ultimate weapon, and it deals holy damage. It teaches Clim Hazard, the awesome move that Beatrix just owns you with earlier in the game. So yeah, I did do this, and I rocked Excalibur with Steiner basically for most of the game. Unless I wanted to like switch off to get like a different ability or something, but yeah. This canonically like it's his ultimate weapon. Unless you're a psychopath and you want to play the game in 12 hours and get Excalibur 2, the sequel that nobody wanted.
Or unless you mod your game to get Save the Queen, but
true.
I've never done that. Once you're done side questing, it's time to go to Ibsen's castle. This is such a cool area of the game, and I love how subtly it suggests how its mechanics work.
And me as a kid was stupid. I did not understand this at all.
When you get there, it literally looks like a castle that is sitting on top of an inverted version of itself.
Yes.
That's weird to describe, but just picture a castle, flip it, and there you have it.
Yes.
It literally looks like that. When we get there, Amarant starts doing Amarant things. He says he's going to go in alone because he works alone.
Yeah,
and
he's so
working
moody.
on a team is lame, and he's so edgy. I think in the notes I just wrote, okay, loser.
You did write that in the notes.
He wants to make this into a competition, basically. He's like, yeah, let's see who can find it first. I'll prove that working on a team is stupid.
So you go in. Did you already talk about the gimmick here?
I did not. Would you like to explain the gimmick?
Yeah, so it's a completely a visual cue, and when you go into Ibsen's castle, there's a Moogle there, and the Moogle will do the usual Moogle things. He'll allow you to tent, he'll allow you to save, but he also has a shop. And if you open the shop, you'll quickly realize that all the stuff he's selling is your starting base gear. Like for Zidane, it's a dagger. For Garnet, it's a rod. It's stuff, and it's weapons and armor that you've long outgrown that are pretty much useless at this point in the game.
It's not just just to jump in for a minute. You also find these in chests throughout.
Yes, exactly.
You find all of the oldest weapons. Very basic, very obvious to find chests as well.
And it's super disappointing.
I'd like to add too. I'm sorry, I don't mean to jump in again.
You're good.
But the music here is A Place to Call Home.
Yes.
A place I'll return to someday. But Uematsu has arranged it such that every other note, not every other note, but every few notes are displaced in the octave. So it sounds, the notes, if you write them out, are technically all there, but they bounce around from octave to octave, giving it this sort of things feel upside down.
Yes, it's a very awesome track. So the point, you're probably wondering, like, what is the point of this? Like, it sucks that I'm opening a chest on disc 3 and getting a dagger out of it. Well, in Ibsen's castle, everything is reversed. So your good gear is useless. You want to equip the worst gear that you possibly can because it's better. Everything is reversed. So the worse your stats are, the worse your gear is, actually the better it is. And if you go in and try and blaze through this with just whatever you have on right now, you're not going to have a very fun time. It can be pretty challenging. I think Magix is unaffected, so I think when I was a kid, I think I just kind of bullheaded through it with like Vivi's magic and stuff. But it's not. You're encouraged to de-equip and like de-equip your character and equip the crappier stuff you find in the shop, which is very cheap. So if you like sold off all your older weapons or use them in synthesis and stuff, it makes it affordable and available to be able to get this and participate in the gimmick of the dungeon, which I think is brilliant in the way they tease it with the half upside down, half upright castle. Like you said, the music, the way they give you
the interior is
chess,
completely upside down as well.
Yes, they tease it in such like a brilliant way. It's such a brilliant dungeon that just everything kind of works together to kind of tell you, hey, this is the gimmick here. I didn't see if you had this written down here too, but if you spend some time exploring the castle, I believe you can get the item that allows the Odin summon here as well.
I already had that.
Did you?
But you might, oh yeah, you might be able to find it here too, though.
There was something else here that had to do with Odin. I remember there's something related.
Oh, yes. It's something that teaches Garnet's the ability Odin's sword.
Yes. The ancient aroma. That's what it was.
Yes. Yeah.
That's what I was thinking of.
Just to say it too, I'm pretty sure it's only the attack stat that is affected. I don't think, like you mentioned, it's not magic. I don't think it's defense or speed or anything. I think it's just attack.
Yeah, because I think they don't sell armor. It's just weapons.
And you only find weapons, which,
yes.
like, honestly, I kind of wish they would have just gone all in. I think that would have been cooler.
Yeah, I wonder if it would have just been too much of a pain in the ass to program to kind of make everything work that way. I don't know. I don't plan to be a game dev, but yeah, it would have been really cool if they went all in.
Maybe they thought it would have been a little too obtuse, you know?
Yeah, maybe. But yeah, I agree with you. It should have went all in. But it's a really cool location. It's a really cool gimmick for this particular dungeon.
As we're going through, we do eventually find Amarant, who found a map that appears to be the key to breaking the seal into Terra. So he's like, yeah, okay, I won. I'm leaving the party. I don't need you anymore. It's not my concern. Again, I wrote, okay, loser.
What a loser.
So we remove, from this map, there are 4 mirrors that correspond to fire, water, air, and earth. We remove them. These will tell us where each of these shrines are. This triggers a boss fight with Taharka, which basically is kind of just like a souped up, like, super gargant. It's not like an overly difficult boss battle. If I didn't write anything down, but I don't remember it being too terribly difficult.
No, it's not. He kind of looks like a shrimp with like Scythians. Yeah. So I don't know. Maybe that's just me being hungry while I was playing it, but I was like, oh, he kind of looks like shrimp. So
he's the one that's been frying all this rice.
You're right. He's also on the Barbie, so a little Outback Steakhouse humor for you. We've reached peak podcasting.
Like you said, there are some puzzles in here that you can do to find some cool treasure. But once you're done exploring, you can leave. And we all realize that Amarant never came back out. So Zidane, being the good guy, he wants to go back in to look for him. I know, dude. This sucks. This is the only reason Amarant is in this game.
I wish I'm like, I know it's against Zidane's character, but just leave him in the castle. I'm sorry.
I mean, it's emphasizing a point that's been made so many times in this game already.
Yeah.
He goes back to find him wounded, and, you know, Amarant's like, I don't understand why you came back, and it's basically just to make the point that friendship is good, actually. And it sucks, man. This sucks. Amarant sucks.
Right. It doesn't even really make sense in terms of like his greater like background or character arc, because the whole reason he's following Zidane is, again, it's still kind of such an obtuse reason because Zidane beat him. But even going with his backstory about how he was the auction house guard in Trino when Zidane like robbed it or whatever, like it doesn't tie together into like a good cohesive story for him literally at all. Like out of everyone in the game, his arc is probably the worst. Yeah.
And by the way, I misspoke. In my essay, I said that there was only one character that is definitively human. I meant Steiner. It turns out Amarant, according to the Ultimania, is a human. I just assume because 1, he's blue, and 2, he has the most unnatural neck out of anything that I've ever seen. I just assumed that he wasn't human, you know?
He looks more like he belongs in the McDonald's cast, if I'm being honest, but I don't.
He fucking looks like a weird Grimace, a fucked up Grimace kind of deal.
Fucked up Grimace. It's like Grimace's brother dropped out of Hamburger University.
He's Ronald McDonald, but a little twisted and edgy.
Yes,
you know?
It's like the Joker Ronald McDonald.
Yeah. Can I get something in like a Joker Ronald McDonald?
Yeah.
We want to appeal to the something to put on the Mighty Kids meal.
If anyone is watching or listening later down the road and you're good at art, if you could do like what would a Wario Ronald McDonald look like? It's essentially that.
Yes. So just to keep track, we've got Hip Hop McCartney. Yeah, that one is still haven't received any commissions for that one. and now Ronald McDonald twisted Amarant style Ronald McDonald. If anybody wants to do that, we will pay you.
Voiced by Mark Hamill, preferably.
Oh, yeah, of course. Otherwise, don't even bother.
Right. Yeah, this sucks. Like you wrote in your notes, you said this sucks. I mean, listen, I'm the friendship game guy. I love the game about friendship as much as the next person, right? But this is stupid.
It's gotta have more nuance than that. Like, this is so like it's like they knew this would be a game that kids would play, and they really wanted to hit them in the face with this, even though this is like handled better within this own game.
Yes, and so many other times that we've talked about already.
But now that we're all set, here's the plan. We are going to break off into teams of 2, 4 teams
Splitting
of
the party
2 specifically.
Once again.
Yes. And each of us are going to take on the Guardian Seals all at once, because there's verbiage on the seals that suggests this. Or perhaps it's something that Hilda overheard Kuja say. I don't quite remember. But Garnet and Aiko are going to take the Water Shrine. Freya and Amarant are taking the Fire Shrine. Steiner and Vivi are taking the Wind Shrine, which is pretty funny because Vivi has to walk behind Steiner's metal armor so he doesn't get blown away. That's pretty good.
Yes.
And Zidane and Quina, who is the only party that we are actually going to play as here, they're taking the Earth Shrine. There's a little line here that like weirdly got me. Quina like comes up and Quina goes, Zidane, you won't go with me. And he's like, well, I sort of got stuck with the leftovers, actually. Like, just being a huge dick for no reason. And Quina says, no need explain. I so happy. Their old saying in my tribe. Leftovers good. I don't know why. I love that exchange so much.
As a younger person, I don't think I appreciated that as much. But now, as an older person who loves having leftovers to take for lunch every day, I get it. It resonates with me so much better now. Yes, Quina, leftovers are good.
I was going towards, the idea of like friendship and Quina feeling like they belong, but leftovers, yeah. I actually I have some lo mein in my fridge right now.
Nice.
That I am going to tear up once this recording is done.
Leftovers good, Rick.
Leftovers good.
Leftovers good.
As you go through here, you're going to get brief scenes of each group traversing their respective dungeons, and upon placing the mirrors, facing off against the 4 Chaos Guardians of Terra. These are all callbacks to Final Fantasy 1.
Yup.
With the Guardians there, which is pretty cool. We're fighting the Earth Guardian, which is Lich from Final Fantasy 1. Honestly, super easy fight. I admit I was a little over-leveled here, but I breezed through this, if you'll pardon the pun. Especially if you equip earth-absorbing gear to block it. But weirdly, Lich against me only ever used Thundaga and one other element, but it wasn't earth. Like, not once did he hit me with earth. I don't know why.
Yeah, I didn't have any problem with this fight. It's never given me that much trouble. I do want to also again reference Steiner and Vivi's fight where they're fighting the Air Guardian. It's flying around, and Vivi, there's a little cutscene where Vivi's like, I'm having a hard time like targeting it, and Steiner's like, okay, here's the plan. I'll run at him and jump onto him and hang on to him to slow him down, and then you blast him with magic. I'm just imagining that scene in my head just makes me laugh. I just think it's funny.
It's nice too, because Vivi's like, I don't know if I could do it, and Steiner just like looks at him and he goes, oh no, he looks at him and he goes, I trust you.
Yep.
And then he just runs off, which is pretty cool.
It is very cool.
I like when Steiner is a normal person.
Right. It's a great plan.
So now that all of the mirrors are placed and all of the Chaos Gardens are taken care of, our next destination is the Shimmering Island. That is where we're going to get into Terra. Of course, though, it's side questing time. It's always frog. Anytime I had a break, I was going to Catch Marsh. There's actually another side quest that I finished here, which you can finish anytime, really, but I did it here. It was the Rare Coffee quest. Did you do this one this time?
No, I did not, but I have done it before, and it's very touching.
It is really touching. So you go back to Morid. You remember he's the coffee fiend, and his daughter will be in there, and she'll tell you that Morid's been super depressed since the Alexandrian cargo ship stopped coming, which is really sad.
All our fault.
If you've gathered the rare coffee, you can give it to him, and he is just elated. He's like never been happier in his life. He says, I never thought I'd get to drink this rare coffee. I'm so happy. I'm ready to join my dearly departed wife now. He says that in front of his kid.
Oh, God.
And, I didn't do it on this playthrough. It's really sweet. The reward you get is just like a treasure, a key item, the mini Burmecia.
Yes.
It's fine. It increases your treasure rank. But I'm pretty sure canonically, if you go back during disc 4, he is dead. I think.
Interesting. I've never gone back after I completed the quest. That's interesting.
Don't quote me on that. I'm almost positive. I remember doing it as a kid, but I haven't done it since. I think that's the case. But this is here when I also went back to Quan's dwelling, which I alluded to earlier. Did you do this one this time as well?
No, again, I did not. I pretty much mainlined it, but I have done this before.
Oh, do you want to talk about it since you've done it before?
No, go right ahead, because again, it's been a while since I've done it.
Do you want? It reminds me of that David Lynch thing where they're like, "Do you want to explain that?" And he's like, "No."
No, I don't want to misspeak because you've done it the most recent, and I've done all this stuff before. I just mainlined it, so
I get you.
I can't lower the quality of your show anymore, Rick.
Yeah, because it's already low.
Oh shit.
So if you go back to Quan's dwelling. With Vivi and Quina both in your party. Quina will have this hallucination in this barren, rundown room where Quina sees a feast, wine flowing into cups, fish everywhere, just this amazing feast. And Zidane's like, what the hell are you doing? And she's eating, Quina's eating, and eventually snaps out of it. And then everybody runs outside, and the ghost of Quan is there. Quina runs in, Zidane runs in, and so does Quail. Quail has shown up somehow, and they all can see Quan. Like, the ghost is there, but everybody can see him. You learn that Quan sort of ran away from the craft because he developed an imagination. Basically what happened when Vivi fell off the cargo ship and Quan took him in, which, by the way, I have a friend named Quan, and every time I think of this, I think of my friend Shaquan. It's I don't know. He doesn't listen to the show, I'm pretty sure. But he says, when I was raising Vivi, he originally just wanted to raise Vivi to be plump and then eat him, but he got attached to him.
Yeah.
And he said that he learned about imagination with Vivi, and he told Quail, imagination is what will let you taste foods that you've never seen before. That's why Quina had that hallucination, because Quina has traveled around the world and now has imagination. And you can't teach that. You have to experience it and learn it yourself. And it was directly Vivi who did this. And, he says he has to go, and Vivi's like, oh, I don't want you to leave again. And Quan will say, he says, life end when you die, but imagination share with others. Live forever. No need be sad. Vivi, as long as you imagine, I by your side. It's like it's comedy, but it's going back to the core themes of the game of like belonging and having a place to call home, and the process of life. Because Quan is not with us anymore. He passed away. Vivi tells us this very early on. Mm-hmm. But we see him again, like a Force ghost. This is Anakin Skywalker, basically, over here. Except he's on the high ground this time.
Right. And except I don't think that Quan killed all the younglings. So, but
well, you never know. The Kuja, we've seen what Quina can do.
True. He was raising Vivi to eat him. So
That's true.
So
also, I think it's really interesting that they refer to Quan and Quail, I'm pretty sure, as he. But the Kuja are supposed to be genderless as a whole. I'm pretty sure. It's just it's weird because, and I think we've talked about this, Japanese as a language doesn't really use pronouns.
Right.
It's just, if they're going to say he or she said that, they're just going to say the name of the person or omit it entirely because it's such a contextual language. Mm-hmm. So this is just an English localization thing. But, I just thought it was kind of interesting.
It's a very touching scene too. And even though it's said in Yoda Ku speak, it's very impactful.
Shout out to Poppy the Keaton, who we were messaging back and forth, and I just offhandedly said, like, oh yeah, if you go back there with Quina and Vivi in your party, like, you get a special scene, I think. This was like, Keaton beat this way before I did, so this was a while ago. And, he messaged me back, and he was like, that was so sweet. I was like, yes, you did it. Good.
Yeah.
Nothing in this game should be missed.
Yeah, I think there's a scene too earlier when you go back to, I don't know if we talked about it, but when you go back to Trino, one of the earlier times that you go back, Vivi has like a scene where he like goes there by himself too. So yeah, there's some pretty touching scenes around that location.
So we're now heading over to the Shimmering Island, and as our ship flies into it, we get sucked in. Garnet wonders aloud. She has heard this referred to as the Path of Souls. Or something. To be quite honest, I forgot to write it down, but it's something to the effect of the Path of Souls.
Sounds Final Fantasy enough.
As the pull grows stronger, Zidane gets an idea. He's like, everybody on deck, we're fucking jumping. He's like, we're going all in. I think he says something like, he's like, we've been through so much. What's one more?
Right. Kind of like, what can possibly stop us now?
We see this huge explosion of reddish pink light, which is actually important. And this tornado-like shape of energy appears. Everybody outside on the ship is just sort of sucked into it. They don't really jump. And this is how we get transported to Terra. As you might have expected, Terra does use the melody of Somewhere to Call Home, a place I'll return to someday, as its main musical motif. It is like a... interestingly, and they do kind of explain this, it's coated in this blue hue and is like, it's vaguely nature inspired. The structures sort of resemble mushrooms. There are like spider webs that serve as things you can climb. But it's also vaguely crystalline. It's tough to describe.
Yeah, it's completely alien to the places that we've seen, which until now have kind of been very typical, like high fantasy style of structures. And yes, if you recall the conversation that Zidane had with Garnet in the Black Mage Village, the only thing that Zidane can really remember from his past, his childhood before he joined Tantalus, was a blue light, and now everything is kind of shrouded in a blue light. So,
yeah. That's not really a spoiler because we're about to find this out,
right?
Like in no explicit terms. Oh, no, actually, I take that back. In explicit terms.
Right.
It's the exact opposite of what I said. I also want to call out, too, we've known that Garnet rediscovered her past and realized that she lost a mother, lost her father, lost her homeland, and had to grow up elsewhere. There is a line early on, and I thank the Ultimania for this because it kind of pointed this out. There's a line early on where Zidane says to Garnet, or says about Garnet, that he feels like, I think it's when he's reminiscing about meeting her in the hallway with Blank. And he thinks to himself, like, I feel like we're connected or we're more similar. And we're going to find out that's just such a good bit of foreshadowing.
Yes.
Such a good bit of foreshadowing. We don't know it at the time, but on subsequent playthroughs, it's brilliant because we're about to find out about Zidane's past. So no sooner do we all get in there, Garland appears. Our team doesn't know who he is, but we do. And he says, so you finally came. The one who folds time is here. He's speaking in a manner that we can't quite grasp. And he goes on to say, you believe a given name has a meaning? This is after we ask him about his name, tell him our name. You have been bewitched by the light of the blue moon. And he invites us in to see what Terra is and what we are. This is, man, when we covered Final Fantasy IX earlier in 2021, I had kind of fallen into the opinion that most people have, that there's like a weak, what did I call it? A soggy underbelly, I think I may have said. Like that Disc 3 gets weak. I firmly disagree with that now. I do think that there is an argument to be made that the end of the game is weak. I'm not saying I believe it, but I can see that side of the argument. I do not think going through this that it is weak anymore. I think it can feel weak in the moment, especially getting the Gulag Stone, because we're never explicitly told that the reason he needs that is to go into Mount Gulag to extract the Eidolons. We're never told that explicitly, but that's the reason. I think it all fits together perfectly. I really think it's laying these crumbs that we finally are arriving at here now to the gingerbread house. We're not going to get cooked by like a witch, like Hansel and Gretel, but we find what we are ultimately meant to find. I think it's great. I take everything I said in that earlier series, I take back.
Yeah, I never really had a problem with, I guess, the parts of the game that people talk about as having issues with, especially this one. And maybe that might be part nostalgia, part just my undying love for this game. I think maybe this is just me reading into it, but as I've kind of thought about it, and we've kind of brushed on that a little bit, I wonder if it's just because the first 2.5 discs of the game do such a good job of not only telling us and giving us little breadcrumbs about like the overarching story and like slowly introducing that, but it balances that with the character arcs that kind of run parallel to that, like in a really good way that doesn't make it feel like overwhelming. It makes it feel natural. And here, once we kind of get to Terra and start doing, like the Oilvert and the Ibsen's Castle and finding out about this other planet, it really kind of starts to shift and zoom in on Zidane's arc and on the overall story arc, and kind of, it doesn't completely disregard like all the other arcs that are running with all the other characters in the background, but it is kind of a shift of like this really good balanced storytelling to like now we're zooming in and really getting into the details of like what Zidane is dealing with, what Kuja's ultimate plan is, and it starts to it gets a little bit more Final Fantasy and a little bit more lore heavy, I think.
Really well said, man. I mean, hey, you explained it so well. Do you want to take over and talk about who we see next?
Yes, sure. So we travel this alien, almost like this Avatar Pandora style planet that's just completely different than anything that we've ever experienced or come across before.
This is directed by James Cameron.
Yes, it is. And there will be blue people in it. No, I'm just kidding. Well, the people have tails, so there's that identity. So, but as we walk, we come across this girl who's dressed in like pink and gray, and we are probably just as shocked as Zidane because her hair and her tail look completely identical to him. She's got the same kind of like short blonde hair. She has a tail. And we spend a couple of scenes kind of chasing her across a few scenes. We had to kind of explore the landscape of Terra, grab a few treasure chests, which I believe also are blue treasure chests. So you can make that visual connection later. And when we finally do catch up with her, we kind of start engaging with her. She asks us that if we really don't remember, and then she asks us to follow along and so we can understand better what her heritage is, and she says what our heritage is too. And this is where we get to what we know as the village of Bran Brawl, and we meet what is called the Genomes, which is this race of people that this girl belongs to. So starting to uncover Zidane's story a little bit more here. What do you think, Rick?
No, I mean, you explained it great. Bran Brawl is a city on Terra. It is full of genomes that all look identical to Zidane. I mean, they're dressed differently, but every single one has the same build, same hair, and the tail. And the girl in pink says, "Welcome home." Pretty immediately, Zidane and Garnet turn around after they hear a rumbling and they can see the Invincible rising up. This causes Garnet to remember the childhood trauma of Invincible destroying Madain Sari, and she faints.
Right.
This is something we as the audience know already, but Garnet is figuring out. They use, I forget what kind of irony that's called. I don't know if it's direct irony or character irony. It's something where you know things that the characters don't, but they use it very well here. We see a voiceover text here. It says, "You are completely oblivious, like a newborn child. You don't know why you were given life or for what purpose you exist. You simply shout to emphasize your life, your own existence." Oof. Now, we don't know what this means right now, but I love that line. You simply shout to emphasize your own existence. Who among us doesn't feel like that from time to time?
No, I think it's even more prevalent too in our current kind of age and the way we kind of communicate with each other, and just without going into like the social, political, any kind of landscape like that. It's just, yeah, it seems like a lot of people are shouting to emphasize their own existence. I mean, it's something we experience every day. So yeah, it's a very interesting line. So we're in the town, right? And we're with with Garnet passing out, we kind of take her to an area where she can kind of lay down, and we have a couple of scenes here where everybody's kind of allowed to go out and explore the city. And I think we get a couple of ATEs here. I think we get one with Vivi. I think we get one with Aiko as well. And people are not like, they're trying to interact with people, but people are just not being very responsive. And I think even Zidane goes out and he tries to talk to some of them, and he calls them stiff, and he does speak to them, and that reveals that they were created and they are not born, and they have this way of speaking about themselves. They refer to themselves as vessels, as not people. They don't need rest, and et cetera, and stuff like this. I'm kind of mixing this in too because I'm reading along with your notes, and it's here where we find in for Garnet and Zidane. We kind of start to see kind of a shift in his normally cheerful, optimistic demeanor, and he says he can't concentrate with all the blue light and just seems more irritable and wants to kind of go off and be by himself. So
he's testy. Yeah, like you said, the blue light is causing him to not be able to concentrate. One of the NPCs, I don't remember I think you see this later when Zidane is walking and talking to Vivi, or maybe it's in the Vivi ATE. The genomes will say that the blue light is actually painful to them. They say they don't like it, and they want it to go away. This is after Vivi is like walking up to one of them and goes, "Boy, that blue light sure is pretty, huh?"
And they're like, "No, it actually causes us immense pain."
But yeah, they speak like automatons because functionally they are. There's a short little cutscene of Aiko trying to find some medicine for Garnet because she's still passed out in the inn, quote unquote. She finds the girl in pink, and the girl in pink says to let, quote, your man know that she'll be waiting in the underground lab. And Aiko gets so flustered, she calls her a bimbo. It's so funny. I forget that word exists sometimes.
Yeah, that's
and to see it in this game used by a 6-year-old is too good.
Yes.
Garnet does wake up. And, she explains to the group what I'm pretty sure we as the players already knew, that Invincible was the one that destroyed her home and her kingdom and her mom. Literally took everything from her. And, everybody gives her words of encouragement, calms her down, and then Aiko remembers to relay the message about that from that pervert of a lady. And this is when Zidane heads over to the laboratory, as well. And once we're down there, we see genomes literally being monitored and created in these giant tubes. It's exactly what you would picture a laboratory growing people to look like. The girl in pink explains that they are all genetically created and modified. Zidane refuses this. He is alive. He has a soul. The girl in pink explains further. You are special. Garland watches over this planet. His mission is to restore the people of Terra. The people of Terra have been asleep for ages, waiting for their time to come. When the time is right, the light of this planet will change from blue to red, and Gaia will become Terra. Terra absorbs other planets to survive as it always has, and when the time comes, the souls of the Terran people will occupy these genomes. That is their purpose.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot to chew on, and listeners, I wrote down a lot of dialogue coming up. I do apologize, but I mean, it's good stuff, and this part of the game gets misunderstood a lot, so I think it's worth, talking about. But just to summarize, and Eric, please correct me if I'm wrong, Terra, as a planet, has to absorb other planets to survive.
Right.
The genomes here are waiting to be filled with the souls of the Terran people who have been asleep, quote unquote, for so long. That is the genome's purpose. That's why they're created. That's why they're here.
Mm-hmm.
Are we all good so far?
Yeah, I think so. And this probably attributes to the reason why a lot of people have mixed feelings about this part, because, again, we switch from this very high fantasy story with these great character arcs to this overarching story where now we're dealing with planets absorbing other planets. So it's a very, very big pivot.
I don't think it's as crazy as we're making it sound.
No, I don't think so either.
If,
I'm the Kingdom Hearts guy, so.
that's not as crazy as people make it out to be.
No,
and if you've played Final Fantasy VIII, I mean, it is not at that level of like plot hole and twisting timey-wimey stuff.
We're not compressing time.
Yeah, that's a game that I kind of dread doing on this show. Not because I dislike it, I like it quite a bit, but like that story is tough.
Yeah.
We're gonna be back in control of Ico now because Zidane is following the girl in pink. She's worried about Zidane. She's gonna go look for him, and through 4 ATEs, we see Zidane. We see the girl in pink leading Zidane to Garland, eventually to a portal that she says will lead to Pandemonium, where the souls sleep.
Great name.
Yeah. On the way, Zidane is going to speak with Quina, Vivi, and Amarant. He is processing this trauma of not being alive. He's completely aloof, like he's barely responding. He's grappling with this idea that he was created, like he's an artificial being. With Quina, is the first one he talks to, he kind of brushes it off. You know, Quina will say that Zidane just standing there not saying anything, oh, you look just like everybody else here. And Zidane goes, well, you look like your master too. You know, maybe people from different races all look the same to outsiders, or something like that your uncle would say on Facebook.
Right. Yeah.
No, there's actually studies that prove that though, that like you can recognize your own race more than other races. You know.
Right.
I'm not justifying the horrible jokes or anything. I'm just saying there's been studies that show it's true. All right.
Right.
Why do I feel like I'm on the hot seat? I fucking put myself here.
It just got like 10 degrees warmer in here. I don't know.
Zidane will run into Vivi. Vivi will say that, you know, he feels like that these genomes are just like the black mages. Like, you know, their minds aren't hollow. They're just, quote, out to lunch. I fucking love Vivi.
Interesting way of putting it, yeah.
Zidane barely even speaks to him. He's just like, oh, yeah, mages, huh? Okay, cool. He does kind of speak to Amarant, but he gets like weirdly testy with him.
Right.
Like it's very bizarre. This isn't the Zidane that we know. As the girl leads him to the portal to Garland, she asks if he's going to see his friends off. And he says, it doesn't matter what I am. If I was born here, I am the enemy of Gaia. To which she responds, you learn quickly. Love that line. And then he says, you know, I've got to finish this, quote, family matter myself. Yeah. And this begins the breakdown of Zidane as a character.
And it's interesting, too, because, you know, we had Vivi discover earlier in the game something similar, that he was a made, created being. And we kind of see how he has to come to terms with that, also being a child. And here we see Zidane all of a sudden discovering pretty much the same thing, that he's a created being. And I would say not that Vivi handled it well, but Zidane is like, at least Vivi talked to people and had Zidane to talk to. Like, Zidane has been the go-to character for all these people to go and talk to, and he's kind of kept everybody together on the straight and narrow. And now this happens to him, and he completely shuts down. He doesn't want to talk to anybody. He doesn't want to express how he's feeling to anybody, even though he's kind of been that person for everybody else the entire game. And we just kind of see, I just think it's interesting how the parallels of Zidane and Vivi kind of deal with that in different ways.
There's a sort of triangular relationship with Zidane, Vivi, and Kuja that I think will be interesting to talk about.
Yes.
But to get there, I'm going to blow through this next point. Aiko rounds up the crew. She talks to the girl in pink and, you know, learns what's going on. We take control of Zidane again as he enters Pandemonium to speak to Garland. Garland is there right away, and he says this: 12 years ago, I lost one of my most prized genomes. I created him and sent him to Gaia to disrupt the cycle of souls there. You are that genome. I am glad you have returned. He goes on to explain that several things didn't go according to plan, like Zidane wasn't meant to grow up there. He believes that a wrench was thrown into this by somebody he describes as Zidane's brother, another genome with an excessively strong will that was sent down 24 years ago, before Zidane. That genome was Kuja. In lieu of destroying Kuja, Garland gave him a mission to wreak chaos and unnatural havoc. Quote, the disruption of the flow of souls is best brought about by war. When Zidane was created in Bron Ball, Kuja couldn't accept another genome more powerful than he, so he discarded him onto Gaia, the planet he was set to destroy, which is why Zidane grew up there. Garland says, perhaps it is because of his desire to justify his existence that he let you live as well. Through it all, no matter what, as weird as this game gets, the game stays focused on its themes of what it means to live and the cycle of life, even through a distorted lens such as Kuja's. There is like Zidane and Kuja together can be like, it's a little bit like yin and yang, right? Where it's the balance of good and evil, the masculine and feminine, with a little bit of each bleeding into each other. Sort of like that. I was thinking about it. I don't think it's quite like the parallel between the id and the ego as put forth by Carl Jung in terms of like the id being the primal urges and the basest desires, and the ego being the front presenting part of you towards society. Please, if there are any Jungian scholars out there, first I'd be shocked, but please cut me some slack. I'm still learning. You could also kind of look at Kuja as Jung's the Jungian shadow, right? That part of the unconscious. I don't know. There are interesting parallels to be made here, but they have this sort of inverse relationship where they, if you put them together, they really are complementary of each other. I don't mean that like they make each other better, but rather they are two parts of the same whole. They really, really are.
Yeah, and I think too, I like that you mentioned this in your notes as well. Even Kuja's distorted lens, we pretty much all of these characters through their arcs and stuff kind of are coming to terms with their own definition of like what it means to live. I mean, we see it through Steiner's arc and how he has to come to terms with, you know, what his duty is and what is morally right, and the things that Garnet goes through and Vivi goes through, and even we get to see it through the distorted lens of the villain, what Kuja is trying to come to terms with, trying to understand what meaning his life has. Because here we discover that Kuja's entire motivation was that he didn't want to be displaced and usurped by Zidane, who Garland apparently made to eventually displace him.
Yes, we learn more about that displacement in a little bit.
Yeah, it might have been jumping ahead a little bit there, but I just think it's such a good point in your notes. I had to talk about it before I forgot about it.
They mentioned the Aoife tree here, and I just want to read a little bit from the Ultimania about what this thing is. So the Aoife tree is originally from Terra, and it was transported to Gaia after Terra's failed attempt at fusing the two planets into one. That failed fusion was catastrophic to Gaia. We've heard about this through the lore in the game, and Garland put that tree there to nurse the environment back to health, to stabilize it, even though it took millennia to do so. And then around 3,000 years prior to the events in the game, he started using the Aoife tree to block the Gaian souls from returning to the crystal in the planet's core. Remember, the cycle of life is a huge, huge theme here. Those souls, along with the souls that Kuja was sent down to disrupt, would be taken into the Aoife tree and held in stasis, basically, until they could be returned to the Terran genomes. That is this whole deal. Zidane was created. Actually, we do learn this here. Never mind, Eric. Zidane was created to surpass Kuja as the, quote, angel of death. Garland calls him my angel of death.
Right.
Because Kuja's lifespan, get this, is limited too. And Zidane was created such that once he comes of age, Kuja would pass, and the superior angel of death would be there. And Garland says, that time, it's coming. But, Zidane, like Kuja, has an incredibly strong will, and he stands diligent, and he vows to destroy Terra. And at this point, Garland says, you're too good to be a regular genome, but I don't have a choice. And he is somehow able to knock Zidane out. And this, we get a quick ATE that shows Kuja in Terra. There's not much more to say about it, but this starts a sequence in the game that many people love, and I don't, if I'm quite honest.
We're going to be on opposite sides of this fence, so I'm excited to talk about it because I think there'll be some good there. If I could too, just really quick, going back to the Aoife tree, also what it does too is that when it's disrupting the cycle of the Gaian souls, right? Remember back to when you fought the boss there, he said that he expelled the excess as mist onto the mist continent. So the whatever process is happening there, the Gaian soul's getting interrupted, returning to the natural cycle of life and death there, got expelled as mist onto the mist continent. So interesting little tidbit to kind of tie that into that situation as well. So just wanted to bring that up for world and lore building.
Exactly.
Yes, this part I was excited. We talked about this today in the Discord just a little bit.
So I know you're a big fan of this part. So would you like to take us through this sequence with Zidane?
Yeah, sure. And I was reading a little bit ahead of your notes here while we had our little break, but yeah, let's go ahead and talk about it. So like you mentioned before, whatever Garland does to Zidane, it's not 100% clear. He kind of just renders him unconscious, and we cut to like you said, we see Kuja here arrives in Terra, and we cut to Zidane sitting on like this throne chair.
Are you gonna read what I wrote? My stupid bullshit literary analysis?
No, I can if you want me to, because I didn't think of it that way, but all your notes always cause me to rethink. You wrote in here how perhaps it was the imagery of what you believe to be like a throne of lies, which could be true, because that has been his life. He's thought one thing, and now all of a sudden his entire life has been turned upside down. And this is kind of where we start to see Zidane have this like existential crisis, and he's just kind of sitting in the middle of a black screen, and we see flashes of each of his party members kind of calling out to them, reminiscing of what he did for them, what he kind of taught them, how he's been there for them. And he kind of just wearily refutes each thing that's said to him as like these people are saying things to him. And then Aiko and Vivi eventually like snap him out of it, and we come back to the room where he's sitting on the throne, and they're with him. They're trying to tell him to get up, and they're trying there to help him, and he needs to get up, and he gets up wearily and just kind of he walks off and basically like shoves them off and says to leave him alone, and he snaps and yells at them and calls them brats and twits. And this is where, first of all, I have to mention the track that plays here, Not Alone, because I adore this track. It's so like, regardless of how we feel for the moment, I think it's the perfect track like for this moment. It's incredible. It's one of my favorite Final Fantasy tracks in the entire series.
One interesting thing about this track is this was not written specifically for this moment. Uematsu had previously written this, and he liked it so much that he kept it, and he decided to reuse it here.
Oh, so he didn't originally write it for 9?
No.
Interesting. Well,
let me see if I can find what he wrote it for.
I can finish telling the story if you find it. That's interesting though, but it's the perfect track for this. So, this takes us into essentially is like what is a series of like easy, like I guess their encounters, mini bosses a little bit. So, and Zidane is like fighting each one as he's going. First he ends up fighting alone, and then he's joined by, in one of the battles, Freya and Amarant, who show up to help him. Again, after the battle, they try to talk to him, snap him out of whatever funk he's in. He just ignores them and moves on. Goes to the next battle where he stumbles across Steiner and Quina getting absolutely destroyed. They kind of get tossed back, and the fight begins with those two, and Zidane joins in. And still, even after that, he ignores their pleas for him to stay with them and to help him out, and calls them babysitting bastards. And finally, once we get to another mini boss, when Zidane gets dropped down to 1 HP, it's a scripted sequence. Garnet comes in and saves him and basically casts like Kiraga on him as well. And she's finally the one who's able to snap him out of it, and basically is like, hey, this is how you want to deal with this. You've always been here for us, and kind of is able to snap him out of this funk. And I love the sequence so much, and I'll let you go first and explain, you know, what issues you have with it, and I'll kind of talk about it, and we'll have a nice little dichotomy there. So did you find anything about the song?
No, I think it's in the Square developer interviews for this game. But those are available on YouTube and Square's site. He didn't write this for this sequence. Is basically, but he loved it. Is what this comes down to.
Yes, I love it too. It's great.
I want to say when he calls out to the rest of his party and calls them babysitting bastards, he has a nice line right after it where he says, "But I know I'm the worst bastard of all."
Yep.
And I think that's a really cool line, even though I don't love this sequence. Strangely, some of the standout dialogue here after Zidane snaps out of it is from other people. Like Steiner has a great line where he says, "Chivalry requires a knight to look after his comrades in arms. I will not abandon you, and I shall follow you to kingdom come if I must." So he's like, I mean, he's done a 180. He's calling Zidane a comrade now,
right?
And it's really cool. But
he went from, remember the line earlier where he went from when he's talking about when they were on the airship and going to Alexandria, he was like, "I'll petition for a life sentence on his behalf."
Yeah,
to
it's the honorable thing to do.
Yeah, to calling him a comrade in arms. It's yeah. Oh God, Steiner's arc. Oh, it's so good.
So I really hate to say it, but this sequence doesn't work for me.
Okay.
And it's for a few reasons. So the language shift of Zidane, brats and twits and bastards, it's so out of nowhere that it feels comical almost. Like when he calls him a twit, I'm like, it's almost laughable. It's not set up in such a way where I feel it's believable. I think this whole thing could be fixed with a little more time to breathe. Because, yes, we do see Zidane kind of being aloof, processing this trauma, but then when he's confronting Garland just before this, he's back to normal, and out of nowhere, he's a different person than we've ever seen before. And just as quickly as it begins, he snaps out of it. He's like, "Oh, you guys, like, I'll always trust you from now on." And spoiler alert, that doesn't happen. But it's too quick is the thing. I know it's the end of the game and they probably needed to finish this, but it needed to be longer, like twice as long. And then it would have been perfect, I think.
Yeah, so I agree with you. I think letting it breathe a little more would have been more effective to the overall story, I think, because you're right. We go pretty much from like Garland making him pass out, Kuja shows up, and then we go right into this sequence. If we had a little bit of time of maybe Aiko and Vivi and all them kind of making their way through Pandemonium to like save him or something, which would have, again, padded out the length of the game. But I think if it would have been, I guess, earned a little more, I think it would have been more effective.
That's really ultimately the only criticism I have.
Right.
Is it's just too compressed.
Right.
That's all.
I think for me, it just really works because I cannot stress enough how much I love the song that goes with this sequence. I guess I love it so much. And to me, it's finally a nice kind of full circle moment because, and I really love this. It's similar to some Kingdom Hearts stuff that happens with Sora. This whole adventure, this whole journey we've been on with Zidane, he's always kind of been this consistent, like, no matter how hard things have gotten, his character's been pretty consistent in that, he's a scoundrel and he's a thief and, he loves girls and stuff. But when it comes down to it, he's loyal to his friends and the people that he's been adventuring with, and he wants to help them and generally wants to do good and do the right thing. And he has helped a lot of them through a lot of the things that they've gone through. He was with Freya when her town was attacked. He's, kind of helped Garnet through the stuff that she's dealing with, helped Vivi. And now it's a complete 180 where Zidane, for the first time in the entire story, is the one that needs that help and that support. And all these other characters kind of welcome Zidane's help when they needed it. And now they want to kind of return that favor to him. And he's just completely shut down and internalized a lot of it. And is kind of just processing it inside of himself and doesn't want that outside help. And maybe in a way I've identified with that because I've done similar things in my life where I've just wanted to be left alone and not reached out to other people for help when maybe I should have. And I just think the whole package where it's just kind of continual over and over, and no matter how much he tries to push off his friends, they still are just consistently coming back and coming after him. And finally, Garnet, the one that he kind of started this whole adventure with, is the one to kind of snap him out of it. I don't know specifically. The whole package just really works well for me because I just like that the change in Zidane's character. And like you said, I know it is very sudden. And like I think now talking to you, I think letting it breathe a little more would have made it much more effective. I just like the way that maybe it's not a subversion of Zidane's character, but it's just the complete opposite of the way he's been for the entire story. And his friends come through for him in the end. And I just, maybe again, as the friendship Kingdom Hearts guy, that just tugs at my heart a little more. I don't know.
And, you know, Zidane has been the one that is sort of a characterization of the game's theme, too. He does hide some of his loneliness behind his carefree attitude. And this is that breaking down. But this is him reckoning with the game's theme of having a place to belong.
Right.
The game has been putting this idea of if life is meaningless, how do we find meaning in it throughout? And I want to put a pin in that because we're going to come back to it
yes,
pretty soon. Hi, everybody. Future Rick here with apologies to Andre, one of our Discord members. I wanted to read his community forum correspondence. We had forgotten to during the actual recording, so I wanted to make sure I got it in here while we were on the relevant section. Andre's response is in regards to the entire You Are Not Alone sequence with Zidane, and here's what he has to say. I just don't think the entire subplot was even necessary, I guess, so maybe I was predisposed to not liking it from the beginning. I didn't need that from the game at all. You know, I think Eric and I kind of presented this, or rather I kind of presented this opinion sort of, maybe not quite as extreme, and we talked about the pros and cons to it, what we thought it could have done better. So I don't know I have a lot to add to that. I do think it is an additive segment to the game, but just to reiterate my point that I made in the episode, it needed more time to breathe. So often in Final Fantasy games, 8 is no exception, I feel like the latter half, or at least the last third or fourth of the game, could just be expanded to breathe more. And I do think that's the case with this scene specifically. So I don't know that I would go so far as to necessarily agree with Andre, but I can see where he's coming from. Just needed a little bit more time to breathe and exist and marinate and let us feel what Zidane was feeling, I guess. Thank you, Andre. Apologies for forgetting you during the episode, but I'm glad I was able to put you in here. So let's go back to my past self and former Eric and see what they have to say about the rest of the game. I hate to do this, but we're going to skip over the next few fights just for the sake of time. I know I said we weren't going to do that. I'm really sorry. Just know that these fights are really cool and they're a bit tough.
Yes.
You're going to fight the Silver Dragon, Kuja's Silver Dragon, then Kuja, and then Garland, all right in a row. Sorry, but for the sake of time, we are going to jump over that. After this, Kuja finally unleashes his trump card. He is able to go into trance. He gains red hair. His tail is finally showing, which he has been hiding in defiance of his true identity. And he casts the most powerful spell in the game, Ultima. Completely levels our party, and he explains to us, after he saw Mog go into trance, or what he thought was trance, he came up with a plan. All the souls that Garland had been storing from Madain Sari, from the Aoife tree, from Alexandria, they're all being stored in the Aoife tree's roots and in the Invincible. Kuja could use them, and in particular, to achieve trance and wipe out our party, he used Queen Braun's soul, which is like a middle finger to Garnet. How terrible.
It's rough.
He promptly kicks Garland 300 style off of this platform, and Garland falls to his death. And as Kuja's about to finish us off, Garland is able to somehow speak to Kuja. And he tells him what we already knew from Garland telling us, that Kuja's lifespan is limited. He was only built to live until Zidane came of age to replace him as the superior angel of death. Kuja will be dead soon, and he will have no power and nothing to show for it. This causes Kuja to have a mental breakdown. I'm gonna put a little insert here. Kuja has now realized that his life is finite, and his life as a whole is meaningless. How does Kuja choose to move on from here? He goes into a mental breakdown where he's going through bouts of denial and anger, and he decides to destroy everything, because if he can't exist, then the world can't exist either. So in a rage-fueled, keep that in your back pocket. In a rage-fueled trance, he begins casting spell after spell, destroying Terra, each one decimating structure after structure, leaving a chasm of fire and debris in its wake. And this is where the team hatches a plan. Garnet and Zidane are going to go and round up the genomes, and the rest of the crew are going to beeline to the Invincible to hijack it and get out of here. This is accomplished. The last genome that we rescue is the one in pink, Zidane. We learn here, finally, that she has a name. It's Mikoto. She tells us that she has a soul. Garland gave her a soul like Kuja and Zidane. She was essentially a failsafe for if Kuja and Zidane both failed. And she wants to be left behind. She's like, life is meaningless and this is all coming to an end. What's the point? And Zidane's like, living is the point. You'll have to figure it out for yourself, but you're coming. So we get all the genomes on board, and we escape Terra as Bran Ball burns forever destroyed.
Is it implied that just Bran Ball is destroyed, or does Kuja destroy the entire planet? Does it go that far?
I
always assumed he destroyed the entire planet because I kind of felt like it was a throwback to Final Fantasy VI.
Yeah. You're probably right. It probably is all of Terra. But then
it's not communicated very clearly, but everything is blowing up. So
yeah. We return to Gaia successfully, but the entirety of the planet is now covered in mist, like heavily so. Freya is the first one to articulate that it's unlikely that Kuja is dead. And we go to the Aoife tree because that's going to hold the answers. So that's our next destination. And that's the end of Disc 3. The good news is Disc 4 is largely just the end game content plus the last bits of the story. So we're going to be able to breeze through some of this. We open in Black Mage Village. It was Vivi's ideas for the genomes to live here. It's really, the mages agreed to, and it's really a sweet dynamic because, coming back to this idea of the cycle of life, the mages had to work out what it means to live and even down to what daily life is. And we see them now explaining it to the genomes. The shopkeeper, a genome is asking, why do you set this stuff out? And he's like, well, it's for the customers. They give us money. And the genome's like, what's money? And so it's really cool. They're effectively teaching a new generation. It's really sweet.
Yeah.
This is also where we officially learn the name of Bobby Corwin. Can't forget that.
On this podcast, we believe in Bobby Corwin's supremacy.
Said it before, and I'll say it 100 times more. But our next destination, assuming you're not side questing, is the Aoife tree. And as we approach it, above it is this giant red orb, which is presumably where we need to go to stop Kuja's plot. We assume that he is still gung-ho on destroying everything. As we approach it, hordes of silver dragons just fly out and begin to attack. It does not look good, but wouldn't you know it, both the Lindblom fleet and the Alexandrian fleets, the Red Rose fleet, appear to shoot down all of these winged dragons to get us in, and in we go to Memoria. This is a place of memories. Garland is able to speak to Zidane throughout this entire sequence telepathically, just Zidane, and he says that this place is created entirely by our memories, and this is where we'll learn the truth. Eric, I have a question for you.
Yes.
What do you know about Carl Jung's collective unconsciousness theory?
Not too much.
Because this is it, baby.
I would say, but I'm assuming Garland in the collective unconscious speaking to us with the collective memories of people that have come before type deal. Yeah, it's all very much, I'm assuming, a lot of that.
I mean, look, there are people that refute Carl Jung, and just as Freud has been refuted, Jung gets refuted, but the idea is that human beings and all life share this collective unconsciousness. It's not something that we're aware of, which is why it's unconscious. But he posited that this is why lore and myths and stories and folktales, they all contain these universal themes, even across cultures. And it's something animalistic that we tap into, whether we know it or like it or not. And this is Memoria. This is the collective unconscious. It is crazy how on the nose it is. There's something later on where Garland, I think, says something, and I just like, there it is. I mean, he's spelling it out.
Right.
It's really cool. The place, the structure is changing. You're going through like castle area, and there will be roads that are just made of crystal. And sometimes you're upside down, and sometimes you're in ruins. It's really difficult to describe. It's really fantastical. And honestly, I mean, looking it up is probably the best way to get a hang on it, because there are just so many different angles, and it's really cool.
Yeah, if you're going to make a final dungeon out of that's basically memories of the collective conscious that have come before you, and even the memories of members of your party, they did a really good job of capturing that in the level design, for sure.
As we proceed through here, we're going to refight the 4 Chaos Guardians, this time us. We also begin to see fragments from our memories. The first one we see, for example, is Alexandria being destroyed, but Quina can't see it because they weren't there.
Mm-hmm.
This is important to set up now, because right after, Zidane is able to see Garnet's memories. He sees her getting into the boat during the storm. And Garnet's like, what is going on? You know, like, why can you see this? And Zidane's like, I don't know. There are also, I think, 3 or 4 ghosts of Tetra Masters past here.
Yes.
Did you challenge any of these dudes?
I have before, but yeah, it's like you can just go into like a random corner and there'll be an exclamation point that you can like play cards with. Yeah, it's kind of a cool touch here.
Oh, I challenged them this time. They stomped me.
Oh.
It was not even close.
Yeah, they are. I think it requires a pretty good, and you probably, I would assume, need to have probably some of the best cards as well.
Yeah, oh yeah. To be clear, this wasn't RNG. Like, their cards were just way better than mine.
Yes.
This part, folks, bear with us. This part might get a little twisty because this is told a little bit out of order. We learn as we go through here that 5,000 years ago, as we mentioned before, Terra was already an old planet, and it wanted to assimilate Gaia, right? It needed to merge with another planet, but there was already life there. And Garland will also pipe up occasionally to explain things too. He said 10 years ago is when Kuja's defiance started. He says, I feared Gaia's Eidolons more than anything. However, I decided to deal with them before they became a major problem. A tremendous force was summoned to Gaia during the Age of War. However, the Gaians were not ready to harness such a great power. They were terrified and broke the jewel into 4 pieces, and they prayed never to see it again. That jewel being the 4 fragments that we've found from the harp, from Aiko's village, and then the royal pendants, respectively.
Which we assumed was used to summon Alexander.
Yes. This is where the failed merging with Gaia occurred from Terra, and this is when Garland created the Ifa tree to bring the flow of souls back to Terra.
Something interesting, too, I read, not to, again, I know we're kind of running here, and I didn't get this from multiple playthroughs until I read about it, but when you're reading about Terra in the online wikis and stuff, they mention about how Terra, when it failed to assimilate Gaia, that the planet Terra is actually inside of Gaia. Did you get any kind of read on that throughout the game? Because I didn't think that's how it was when it happened. It seemed to me like it was a completely separate planet.
Yeah, I don't think I got that either.
Okay.
To be quite honest with you.
That's what a lot of the wikis were saying. I don't know. Again, that's like a lore nitpick, but I was just kind of like, I don't know.
Eventually, Zidane and the party is going to reach space. It's literally like,
Space.
If Zidane walks off, he will be floating in space. Yeah, cue the Tim Curry sound effects, please.
Space.
Space!
Garland speaks to Zidane. He says, don't be afraid, step out. And we do, and we walk through literal space. Garland says, you have entered a new realm. There are no more worlds. There is no more space. Follow your memory, your original memory, and march forth. Here it is. Here's where we learn about the memory thing. Zidane asks, why can I remember other people's memories? And Garland says, he leans straight into this idea of collective unconsciousness. He says this, do not limit memory to just one individual's experiences from birth. That is only the surface. Every life born into this world, whether natural or artificial, requires a parent, and that parent also requires a parent. Life is connected, one to another. If you trace the root of all life, there exists one source. The same can be said for memory. All life constitutes an intelligence that holds memory beyond experience. Memory is not isolated within individuals. It is an accumulation of generations of this is so cool, of memories that continues to evolve. You can say that memory and evolution go hand in hand. Zidane then asks what he'll find when he traces memories all the way to the origin point. And Garland replies, a presence that presides over all life and memories, the crystal. And then he finishes by asking him to take care of Kuja and protect the crystal. Mm-hmm. So that's a lot.
It is.
I mean, this collective unconsciousness, for all intents and purposes, is in this game. We've been talking about the cycle of life, that everything that dies is reborn into the planet and becomes one with the stars and is then reborn again. It's just this continual cycle. There's a term for it in my brain, is the eternal return.
Yes.
Is this philosophical concept of this cycle of life. And it's, it ties into this idea of how do we find meaning in it. Surely, I don't mean to presume, but surely, like me, you didn't get this as a kid, right?
Oh, no, absolutely not. But in a way, too, I kind of view this as kind of like a Final Fantasy VII callback as well, because 7 deals with this stuff, too, with like the life stream and, life returning to the planet and stuff, too. So kind of keeping in, I know people complain about it sometimes, but it keeps in with the themes of like games that have come before as well. So.
Right, exactly. And I think that could be the case, too.
But no, it sounds like it's not anything that I've studied or read, but it sounds like it's a very serious, like, philosophical discussion that, there's no way I would have grasped this as a kid. No way.
We could talk about this more when we get to the very end. So we'll put a pin.
Pin.
So many pins, so many pins to be unpulled. So this is ultimately going to lead us to a portal that takes us straight to Trans Kuja and the crystal, the birthplace of all things. Kuja intends to destroy it and destroy all life and all memories, everything. Because again, he can't find meaning in existence, so he wants to snuff it out. He has that sort of philosophy. Not nihilism. That's I talked about that in the Kefka bit in 6, but this is similar to Kefka.
Yeah, it's basically like he has the attitude that he's like, well, if I can't exist, none of you get to exist without me. It's a very selfish way of thinking.
And Kuja isn't fazed that we're here, because he says the Ifa tree has already started its process, and Terra is going to assimilate Gaia. Okay, so Terra is not destroyed. Terra will assimilate Gaia no matter what Zidane does or says, and it doesn't matter. But Zidane says, even if that does happen, life is going to begin anew. Even if it takes millennia, the cycle will continue. And this leads into 2 back-to-back fights, more or less back-to-back. First with Death Guys. That is not multiple guys as the Grim Reaper, but like this giant bat type thing. Pretty straightforward. It's got like a lot of attacks that will do a lot of damage, but and it's got 2 forms, open and closed. Not a huge deal. But this leads into the fight with Kuja. Mm-hmm. Trans Kuja, I should say. Very, very tough fight.
Yeah, he has a lot of really high level magic. I believe he casts, is it Super Flare, which is an enhanced version of Flare, like Flare Star.
Flare Star.
Yeah, Flare Star, which is like an enhanced version of Flare. You can cast Kiraga. I believe he can cast Holy as well. So, he just has a lot of like high level magic, and he's casting it very, very often, and he can heal himself. So, yeah, and he has a lot of magic that damages your party at once. And by the way, can we just like mention the track? And I'm sure you're playing it in the back as we talk about it. That plays while we fight him, because it's really good and it's so awesome. I love it so much.
Yeah, it is really, really cool. Once again, like before, Kuja will end the fight by casting Ultima, which wipes everybody. And Zidane is the first to awake. He's critically injured. Kuja and the crystal are gone, and we hear this voice. And here's what it says. You stand before the final dimension, and I am the darkness of eternity. All life bears death from birth. Life fears death, but lives only to die. It starts with anxiety. Tell me if this sounds familiar. Anxiety becomes fear. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering. That's actually in here. The only cure for this fear is total destruction. Kuja was a victim of his own fear. He concluded he could only save himself by destroying the origin of all things, the crystal. Zidane has no idea what's going on, by the way. He keeps saying, like, what are you talking about? And the voice continues. Now the theory is undeniable. Kuja's actions prove it. All things live to perish. This is Necron, the one who exists to return everything back to the zero world. Necron insists that all life will eventually behave as Kuja did on a long enough timeline, and Zidane fights back that as long as they have a will to live, they will. Even if they are born to die, they still live. And this begins the fight against Necron. Let's talk about Necron.
Yep.
This is a very controversial final boss in this series. Well, first of all, what do you think about Necron?
Yeah, it kind of comes out of nowhere, right? Because the whole game, Kuja is built up to be pretty much like the final threat that you'll confront, and that's made even more so when he goes into trance on Terra and destroys Brandball and all that kind of stuff. And then for this to kind of come out of nowhere with kind of no prior warning, it's very jarring, and it just kind of feels out of place. I'm trying to determine within myself that I've just accepted that it happens because I've played it so many times, and I guess I'm trying to work through my feelings in it real time, so this is an adventure. I understand what it is that Necron represents, right? He's the physical manifestation of the existential dread that everybody feels when thinking about death and thinking about dying, and he exists to basically return the world to the void, the blackness of nothing, where there is no fear of death because there is no life. And he's the physical manifestation of like all these things, like he's saying. He's like, oh, life lives only to die, and people fear death, and all this stuff. Like, and for Zidane and the party to like go up against that as like the final boss, because it's like such a stark contrast of the themes that the game has been teaching us and telling us along the way. Like, I understand it, but I don't know if they went about it the best way.
So the way I see it, there's the dramatic effect of it and the thematic effect of it.
Okay.
The dramatic effect is that it's a final boss that we've never seen or have heard reference to, right? And I think that's what people get upset about.
Yes.
They say, oh, it came out of left field. Why is this even here? You know, it should have been Kuja. Fine. Thematically, though, it fits perfectly.
Yes.
We've been fed these breadcrumbs throughout this entire game. If life itself has no inherent meaning, what does one do? There are a few paths. The path that our party lands on is you find meaning in living, right? You create your own meaning through friendship, through a place to call home.
There it is.
Yes, exactly. Kuja represented the antithesis of this. Life is inherently meaningless, therefore, skip a few steps, destroy it all, right? It's and Kuja and Necron, as you said, is the manifestation of this idea. It is the party's last stand to, well, literally verbalize the theme, quote, to live, with an exclamation point. And they do say that. It's kind of nice, but it is thematically their last chance to enact their will in accordance to that. They are standing ground and saying, this is what we truly believe in, that life may not have a purpose, but we find purpose within it, given our circumstances and our relationships and our experiences. And this is them standing up for that idea against the oppression of it. I think thematically Necron fits extremely well. I mean, yeah, I mean, if he would have been referenced in the game, or if it would have been referenced in the game, maybe a little better, you know? But I don't think it's as bad as everybody says. I really don't.
I think I agree with you too, and yeah, maybe it could have been communicated a little better, but I think what people have trouble wrapping their heads around is that it's not a traditional, like, you defeat the boss at the end of a video game type thing, which is what Kuja represents, right? He's like the final boss. He's the final hurdle to overcome. It's like you said, it's very much a fight against it's more of like a conceptual fight than it is like against an acting force in the world. It's the final stand between the two opposing ideologies. It's almost very like meta, but
if Kuja is the final boss against our party, the final antagonistic force to our party, Necron is the final antagonistic force to the game's thematic identity.
Yes, that's very well put. Yeah, pretty much exactly. I understand it comes out of left field, but again, I agree with you. I think thematically it works.
The fight itself is nuts. I mean, Blue Shockwave will reduce a party member's HP to 1.
Yep.
Neutron Ring will deal just tons of damage. And then his most powerful attack, Grand Cross, which inflicts any number of possible status effects to every character at random.
Yes.
It is crazy. If you are a hoarder of elixirs, this is the fight to use them.
Yes, absolutely. Because there's nothing after this.
It's a really tough fight.
Yep.
Once it's over, as Kuja predicted, the Aoife tree begins to react. Sid is driving the Hildegard airship, and he descends to pick everybody up. But Zidane hears Garland's voice one more time. And Zidane knows that he needs to go and save Kuja. He can feel that he's still alive. Zidane actually says he would have done the same if I were in his shoes. You know, if Zidane was the angel of death. I'm not so sure about that.
Yeah, I'm not convinced.
So remember in Pandemonium, when Zidane was not alone and he told everybody, you know, I'll trust you, I'll rely on you. Well, he doesn't. He does the exact opposite, actually. The entire crew says, like, Zidane, this is a bad move. This is dangerous. You're going to get in trouble. Like, this is bad. And one by one, they say their goodbyes because Zidane says, like, no, I've got to do this. Garnet is the last one, and she makes him promise to return. And they depart on the airship. So this is where, sort of like what happened in Evil Forest, the Aoife tree's roots are violently hurling about and attacking, and Zidane jumps into the chasm to find Kuja. There is the most absurd, like, action movie shot here, where Zidane is free-falling and it pauses in midair.
It's so
as
funny.
Zidane and Kuja lock eyes. The camera rotates all around, and then Zidane just keeps falling.
And he does this motion too while he's falling, like where he's like trying to swim like through the air. It's it's so funny.
It's so weird. You never know what to expect with these games.
Yeah.
But Zidane, you know, falls to the ground and climbs up to get Kuja. And they have this little talk. Supposedly, Kuja had something to do with their party escaping. They both say it. I don't buy it, but that's what they say.
Mm-hmm.
As they're having this little heart-to-heart, Kuja is sort of repenting a little bit. Again, I really wish they just, you know, don't go back on that. But the Aoife tree's roots, they continue their assault and they, like, come down hard on Zidane and Kuja and they surround them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. That's all we see. This transitions into the epilogue. We get sometime later appears on the screen. First off, we see Vivi walking in Alexandria, and he says, like, oh, so this is Alexandria. And you're like, as a player, you're like, what? And Puck bumps into him, and he's like, oh, Vivi, it's so good to see you. And he's like, how do you know that name? He's like, what are you talking about? And it turns out it's not Vivi. It's Vivi's son. And in marches a whole gaggle of them.
Is that the plural of what multiple Vivis are? Is a gaggle of Vivis?
Yeah, sure.
I like it.
Sure. A stampede
Yeah.
of Vivis.
Yeah.
A coalescence.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Council of
gaggle.
Vivis.
I like it. This is where we get a final voiceover, a very famous final voiceover.
Oh, this part breaks me every time.
As this voiceover is going on, we see our party members reunited, living their lives, basically. Freya is reunited with Fratley. They're beginning their relationship anew. Beatrix is laying down her sword. And then Steiner is asking, it's really sweet. Steiner asks her to stay by his side forever to protect the queen. Aiko lives with Sid now and calls him dad, father. And that chokes him up a lot. It's really good.
Mm-hmm.
But all the while, Vivi is giving this final voiceover. He says this. He says, I've always talked about you, Zidane. How you were a very special person to us. because you taught us all how important life is. You taught me that life doesn't last forever. That's why we have to help each other and live life to the fullest. Even if you say goodbye, you'll always be in our hearts, so I know we're not alone anymore. Why I was born, how I wanted to live, thanks for giving me time to think, to keep doing what you set your heart on. Yeah, I'm not even going to edit this out.
Oh boy.
It's a very hard thing to do. We were all so courageous. What to do when I felt lonely, that was the only thing you couldn't teach me. But we need to figure out the answer for ourselves. I'm so happy I met everyone. I wish we could have gone on more adventures, but I guess we all have to say goodbye someday. And then he concludes, everyone, thank you. Farewell. Cycle of life, my memories will be part of the sky. It's beautiful.
I can't think of a better way to just bring that little epilogue, that little reading from Vivi just brings everything that this game has talked about to just full circle and just kind of encapsulates it just beautifully. It's to this day, whenever I finish the game and I sit through this part and I read it, tears. It's just tears. That's all I can say.
And it touches on every single theme, for the most part, in the game. It doesn't touch on the importance of a post office.
Yeah.
But, you know, the major theme, to live, it's in there. The cycle of life, it's in there. What it means to find...
family, or a place to belong.
Yes, family, thank you. That's exactly the word I was thinking of. Family, whether it be kin or outside. It's all in here. I mean, this narrative is so thematically focused. And yes, I mean, there are pacing issues. I get it. But thematically, I think it is extremely focused and it's well done.
And it's consistent through to the end.
Yes, exactly. I mean, you can argue about Necron, but I don't think, even setting Necron aside, I don't think it affects the narrative such that anyone could reasonably call this bad or mishandled. But we're not done yet. There is a final scene, because while all this is going on, while Vivi's voiceover is going, Tantalus is getting ready to put on I Want to Be Your Canary in Alexandria. One last time. This is, I mean, again, thematically, life comes full circle, so we are literally coming full circle. With Queen Garnet in attendance, along with all of Alexandria. Nobody has seen Zidane, by the way, since that incident, and she still misses him. She says things will never be the same. And so the play begins. It goes on as normal. The dialogue is like super parallel to Zidane and Garnet's relationship. Until the main character, Marcus, he is in a cloak. You can't see who he is. Marcus, the lead, he throws off his cloak, and wouldn't you know it, it's Zidane. It's Zidane. And the line going into this, it's, I don't quite remember. It's Marcus, like, wondering, he's saying a prayer to, like, be reunited with his lost love, and he's praying to the two moons, which, like, by the way, cinematically, are, like, cinematography-wise, whatever, are in really cool, very coolly framed in the background. It's very neat. And he throws his cloak off. It's Zidane, and he says, "Grant me my only wish. Bring my beloved Garnet to me," or Dagger, whatever he named her as. Who could have saw it coming? I mean, we certainly saw it coming, right. I would imagine. But, like, you know, they haven't seen Zidane for ages.
Right.
And so Garnet runs off immediately. Steiner and Beatrix just open the door for her. And as she's running, she drops her royal pendant. And she hesitates for a moment and chooses to move on. So this is another instance of her her life is changing beyond what it is currently. She's choosing to move on, move away and be with her true love, Zidane. And this is where the two embrace. Literally everybody is applauding, like cliche fairy tale. Like the whole kingdom is applauding. You see all the little VVs. I think this is the first time Quina is in a CG. Weirdly, which is pretty cool.
You see like all the like townspeople too, or like clapping, like what the going on? We're just here to show. Like,
and while the two are embracing, Steiner and Beatrix together raise Save the Queen, the sword, ushering in a new era of Alexandria. And there's like there's another little, I mean, probably is not a voiceover. They're probably talking to each other, but it's on a screen of black. It says, "How did you survive?" He says, "I didn't have a choice. I had to live. So I sang your song, our song." And if you remember, Garnett's song, Madain Sari, is Melodies of Life. And this is where, and by the way, I mean, refer to episode 1, that is this game's theme. So as, you know, as the credits roll, Melodies of Life plays. It plays as a farewell to the PlayStation era, a farewell to Sakaguchi, and to Final Fantasy IX. And that's the game.
We made it.
I mean, look, I get Necron. Sorry, you go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say I can't. Like your last sentence just sums it up so well. It's a farewell to the PlayStation era, Sakaguchi, Final Fantasy IX. From here on out, things would be different, and it's just, you know, I hope the people listening can just tell what this game means to you, means to me, and yeah, it went longer than we wanted it to, but we got here, and yeah, it's just, I don't know. A lot of thoughts are running through my head right now.
Necron aside, like, I don't want to camp out on him too much, but even throwing that to the side for a moment, I cannot imagine a better wrap-up.
No.
Like, it's a perfect ending. And yeah, it's a little saccharine. You might be saying, like, oh yeah, it's a little too cheesy. But I can't imagine it being any different. The narrative demands this, almost.
Yeah, and like you said, again, Necron aside, everything is kind of just tied up in this perfect little bow. Like, I again, aside from Amerin and just some of that stuff, the storylines and the arcs are wrapped up in such a satisfying way. And I think this is the perfect ending, because I'm just thinking about, you know, some of the endings of other Final Fantasy games, and, you know, Final Fantasy VII, and how that ending is open to interpretation, and you know, just some of the ones that come after 9 and what you can interpret from their endings. And this is a very, very definitive, clear ending. And I think that's okay. I don't think every ending in a video game has to be this obtuse thing that you have to interpret and read between the lines to figure out like what they're trying to tell you. I think for this game, this is the perfect way to wrap this up. It's the perfect way to wrap up a celebration of Final Fantasy. It's the perfect way to wrap up this era of Final Fantasy on just a positive note, with all of the themes and all the things that they were trying to tell us with this game. It's just, I don't think, and again, even slow parts and parts where we had problems aside, it's perfect. It works so well with everything that we've gone to get through this point.
And it couldn't be ambiguous either, right? Because, I mean, this ending is a new birth for Alexandria.
Yeah.
It's a new birth for Zidane and Garnet. It's a new birth for Fratley and Freya. As the cycle of life, what dies is reborn. And, you know, as a farewell to Sakaguchi, I mean, and Uematsu, it's a farewell, but that doesn't mean that they're done, right? They're leaving Square, but they'll be reborn again. And they do get born again. Lost Odyssey, which, you know, doesn't quite reach the same heights. Fantasian, same could be said. Right. Blue Dragon. But it is a direct, I mean, it's not just a farewell to 9, it's a farewell to them, right? And that's Melodies of Life lays it out so well. Mm-hmm. I can't read the lyrics again. I had a tough enough time doing that for the first episode.
And I think it's something too that's so rare. I just think about doing something, you know, like this in today's age, in the gaming industry we exist now, to have somebody commit the resources to where you're like, hey, we want to make this celebration game of everything that came before because we're going in a new direction, is just kind of, it's just kind of insane when you think about it. And the creators in the industry aren't afforded the leeway or to do stuff like this anymore. And I think that's why it's so special, because it's a very clear demarcation of the past and kind of the present of Final Fantasy. After 9, everything kind of changes with all the good and the bad that comes with that. And it's just incredible that this is the game that marks that separation, that we got this game at all. Just when I think about everything that it tells us and the age that we're in now, it's just like we'll never see something like this probably ever again.
I really don't think we will. I mean, happy to be proven wrong, but
same.
Everything just lined up so perfectly.
Yeah. I don't know what much more we can. I don't know what
Buddy,
much more we can
we've
say.
talked for over 10 hours. I don't think there's anything left to say.
I mean, yeah, I'm sure we could have probably spent hours more on individual plot points or fleshing out the meanings of things a little bit more. Like, I'm sure there's content there, but this is about as deep as you could probably expect to get on something like this without doing multiple series and episodes on it. So, yeah.
Sure, and the point of analytical projects such as this is not to be exhaustive, right? I really don't believe that's the case. Otherwise, you would have one person writing one essay on one thing and that's it.
Yeah.
Because that's exhaustive.
Or you end up with over 30 hours of Kingdom Hearts content.
Oh yeah, I wonder. It's about the justifications and what we see in this, because we are not going to see what others see in this.
Right.
But all we can do is justify what we have seen.
Yeah.
And that's part of what makes this hobby worthwhile. And that's why people read. That's why people watch plays and listen to music. It's all connected.
Yeah, I think the ultimate purpose is for just to, you brought me on here for us to explain why we love this so much and why this game resonates so much with us. And to me, that is the beauty of the hobby, and that is the beauty of storytelling, because everybody interprets things differently. And I love hearing about the way things like this make people feel and hearing their perspectives on it, because that's what does ultimately make it interesting and make it worthwhile, and makes these kind of conversations, and this is things we're able to bond over as humans and make friends over. And that's been the best part of, honestly, all of this. So yeah, I don't know, just kind of trying to tie this whole thing together and not get too teary-eyed over it.
I think we've done a good job of explaining it, and here we are. I mean, we've arrived at the end. So yeah. This has been quite a lot. Eric, I want to thank you again for joining me. Everybody, check out The Unlockables. It is fantastic. I understand at the time of recording, it'll probably be out by the time this comes out, but you just finished up your last major one. Isn't that correct? Or at least the script?
Yeah, Dream Drop Distance is done. By the time
I couldn't remember the name.
Yeah, that's okay. It's a stupid name. After this, we're one game away from Kingdom Hearts 3, and after that, we're in the home stretch. So yeah, we're coming up on a close on that. And I just want to say, Rick, thank you so much for allowing me to be on 5 episodes or 4 episodes of your show in a row, and thank you so much to the Pixel Project community for tolerating me being on 4 episodes in a row. It's really been an honor to be able to come on and talk about this game that I love so much. And in a way, it's kind of just, not to make it about myself, but it's just a beautiful, I've been doing this Kingdom Hearts series for like a year and a half, and I was trying to wrap it up by the time my son is born in March, and to be able to wrap up that series and get to do this with you about 2 of my favorite stories ever told in anything that are incredibly important to my life before my son shows up, there's just something beautifully poetic about that. And I just want to say thank you for that opportunity, because Final Fantasy IX is the other side of that coin for me, that Kingdom Hearts is. So thank you so much for letting me be here. And I really hope I delivered for your listeners, and I hope it lived up to your expectations.
Absolutely, dude. The pleasure is all mine. And, you're entering into a new stage. The cycle of life continues.
It is, and
right?
I'm trying really hard not to cry thinking about that right now.
what the meaning of life means to you is about to change. And that is baked into this game, you know? So everybody, thank you so much. I'm not even going to worry about doing any plugs. This has been an incredible journey. Eric, thank you again.
Thank you.
Once again, as always. I am Rick. I am your host. We'll catch you next time.